All right, good morning, everyone. I forgot my earlier preparatory greetings to greet members of the media who are here as well. And in the gallery. Did I not? Yeah. It's a lot of different people. A special welcome to Andrew McCrate with the Planning Department. So we got a bit of a fiddly meeting today. There's lots of delegations, some procedural stuff, and speakers to, I think, most of the items, but let's see what we can clear off the top. I will first acknowledge that Ottawa is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. Il est important de souligner que la ville d'Ottawa se trouve sur un territoire non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe, dont la culture et la présence ont enrichi et continuent d'enrichir ces terres. I'll ask Kelly to do a roll call.
Councillor Brockington,
Here.
Councillor Curry, Councillor Dudas, Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Sure why I'm not here.
Kelly's here.
Yeah. Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
And Councillor Troster.
Here.
Vice Chair Gower.
Here.
And Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you very much. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 5.1 to 5.4 on today's. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for a zoning bylaw amendment and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on September the 13th, 2023, please email or call the committee coordinator. Are there any declarations of interest? None. Confirmation minutes. Are the minutes of meeting 13, Wednesday, August 16th, 2023 confirmed? Confirmed. Okay, so going through the substantive agenda, the item 4.1, the omnibus official plan amendment, we do have delegations to speak to that, so we will hold it. The item on 3430 Carling Avenue, we have a presentation. We have delegations to speak to that, so we'll hold it. The zoning bylaw amendment for 314 Bell Street South. We don't have any public members registered to speak to it. I know there is a technical motion that is going to be moved by Chair Gower. Lucas Tardioli is with the applicant. Lucas, if you're here or online, if committee is prepared to carry this item, did you still need to speak? Now we're just waiting to bring Lucas in. There he is.
Hi. No, I don't need to speak. It's we can carry the item.
Okay. Sorry, I had a little difficulty hearing you, but it looks like you said if committee is prepared to carry this item, you don't need to speak.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you. Vice Chair Gower has a technical motion on this one. Do you want to move that now, Glenn?
Yep, thank you. Whereas the report seeks approval to permit a 3-story, 4-unit addition to an existing 3-story, 4-unit apartment building, and whereas a technical amendment is required to correct one error in document 2 of the report, therefore be it resolved that with respect to the report, Planning and Housing Committee amend document 2 by substituting section 2B3, despite section 65, table 65, a porch may project 0.1 meters from a side lot line with, despite section 65, table 65, A porch and stairs may project 0.1 meters from a side lot line. And be it further resolved that pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act, no further notice be given.
All right, I'll start a speakers list on that technical amendment. Is the amendment carried? Is the item carried as amended? Carried. Thank you. The item at 729 Ridgewood Avenue, we have delegations to speak to it. There's also a motion on the item. We're going to hold that one. The zoning bylaw amendment for 1200 Maritime Way. There is a delegation to speak to that one. We'll hold the item. Item 5.5, the directions report aligning the zoning bylaw with Bill 23. We have a number of delegations. We'll hold this item. The 2023 Affordable Housing Capital Strategy and Update. We have a registered speaker, so we'll hold the item. Big motion. We also have the motion from Councillor Hill later in the agenda. Just because I know there are a couple of people who have suggested they would like to speak if it's going to be held. There is an IPD on the use of Section 37 funds to fund an acquisition by the Ottawa Community Land Trust in beautiful River Ward, with the funds coming from Kitchissippi Ward. I hadn't intended to hold or lift that item. Did anyone want that lifted? So is that received? Thank you. Mary and Mike, you're off the hook. So let's go back. The first item is the Omnibus Official Plan Amendment. That's sort of a routine item in which there's a lot of different amendments done to the zoning bylaw to ensure that it matches the intent of the official plan. We don't have a presentation on that, but I know staff are prepared to answer questions if members have any. But we also have delegations on that today. And first up is Jason Burgraff with the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association. And Jason, we also have, while you're taking your seat, we have a technical amendment that's I'll get presented at the same time.
Okay, technical amendment, whereas the Planning and Housing Committee meeting of February 27, 2023, city planning staff were directed to prepare a series of omnibus reports relating to different amendment categories. And whereas since the February 27, 2023 Planning and Housing Committee meeting, staff have identified amendments attached as document 1, citywide and urban amendments, whereas an error was found in proposed amendment 16. Therefore, be it resolved that with respect to the report, Planning and Housing Committee approved the amendments to documents 1 as set out in Annex 1 attached to this motion and held on file with the city clerk. And the annex is attached, and I believe it has been or is being circulated right now.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. I apologize, Mr. Burgraff. Please go on ahead. You have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thanks very much. I will be very short and sweet. Just first and foremost, thanks very much for delaying this from the previous session to give GOBA and city staff time to review 80 plus changes overall. We did a lot of good work with staff, very happy. Thanks very much to Robin and Ben for doing that. We had a very few little items that were still of concern left that was part of our written submission. One of those has been addressed in the technical amendment you see before you. Others are smaller issues, and one was an issue, a misunderstanding on our part. So clarity has been set there, so we're good to go. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions for Mr. Burgraff? See none. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And Derek Howe with Taggart Realty Management is also signed up as a speaker. Fantastic. Thank you. And I do want to thank staff for their support for holding that off for a couple of weeks while they work through some last minute issues or some unresolved issues. Do members have questions for staff? Councillor Kavanaugh?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I should have asked this to GOBA, but I just want to know about the They're concerned about the wording to clarify cycling facilities, including the shared lanes. And if that can be, maybe they can give some information on that about bike lanes, cycle tracks, and multi-use pathways.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and to you, Councillor. GOBA was asking about us to include a definition of what a cycling facility is. They were hoping that it would include cycle tracks, the share rows, as well as the MUPs. We declined to add a definition into the official plan, and we would like to rely on the transportation master plan in order to give a clear definition of what cycling facilities are. With that said, however, the definition that we do have did include the elements that the GOBA members were asking for.
Okay, just want to make sure that that was clarified, since it's rather important. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions from members. I have one. You're in receipt of correspondence from Cheryl Parrott, I believe, with respect to the Wellington West secondary plan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I received a message from Cheryl yesterday. It was regarding an item in the plan. There was a typographic error where we mentioned the West Downtown core plan when we really should have mentioned the Wellington West plan. It was in the rationale, so it doesn't change the outcome of what we're hoping to do, and the outcome is still correct. But our rationale was incorrect in the sense that we should have said that we wanted to move the properties on Armstrong, the 3 properties on Armstrong, into the Wellington West plan.
Thanks.
From the Wellington West. No, from the Scott Street plan to the Wellington West plan. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
Could I just ask you to take direction on that one, to have a technical motion prepared in time for council to make the necessary wording change?
Yes, we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Is the report carried? Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone involved. Good work. 3430 Carling Avenue. This is a zoning bylaw amendment to permit 2 6-story residential buildings. We have staff. I believe staff are going to provide us with a short presentation on this. Fantastic. I'm in your hands.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Lisa Stern. I was the planning lead on this application. So this is an application for rezoning at 3430 Carling Avenue in Bay Ward. Next slide, please. The site is located at 3430 Carling Avenue on the south side of Carling between Ullswater and Crystal Beach Drives. This site is currently occupied by a 1-story commercial building and a large parking lot. Surrounding land uses include, to the north and south, single-family homes, low-rise apartments, which are zoned residential 5th density subzone A with heights up to 34 meters to the west, and a gas station and restaurant to the east, beyond which is zoned residential 5th density subzone A with heights up to 34 meters and developed with low-rise residential apartments. This site is currently zoned general mixed use zone, subzone 20, with exception 2628 and a height limit of 18.5 meters, which would generally allow a 6-story building to be constructed. Next slide, please. The subject lands are designated as neighborhood and outer urban transect. Neighborhood shall be predominantly low rise. However, higher heights are permitted in areas characterized by taller buildings. Next slide, please. The proposed development includes 2 6-story apartment buildings with a combined unit count of 186 units. The site is proposed to be accessed from Carling Avenue by a drive aisle between the two buildings. The driveway leads to visitor parking at the rear, and resident parking is in the underground parking garage. Next slide, please. As a result of public consultation, building heights were reduced from 9 stories to 6 stories. Next slide, please. It is recommended that Planning and Housing Committee approve the zoning bylaw amendment to permit 2 6-story buildings on the site. Next slide, please. The relief sought is to increase the height at the front of the property from 18.5 meters to 20.5 meters and maintain a 6-story building height. Increase FSI from 2 to 2.1. Reduce the required setback along Carling Avenue from 3 meters to 1.5 meters. Reduce the required landscape buffer along Carling from 3 meters to 1.5 meters. And reduce the minimum separation distance between a building and a private way from 1.8 meters to 1.5 meters. Next slide, please. Neighborhoods located in the outer urban area shall accommodate residential growth and implement development standards that transition away from a suburban model and move towards urban built forms. Neighborhoods shall be predominantly low-rise. However, higher heights are permitted in areas characterized by taller buildings. The proposal conforms to the official plan by providing a mid-rise built form in an area characterized and on a site characterized with permissions for mid and high-rise buildings. The proposal conforms to the transition policies of the official plan. The proposed 2-meter increase in height is located away from the homes on Laurier Avenue to ensure that an appropriate transition to low-rise development is provided. And a right-of-way protection of 37.5 meters for Carling Avenue is provided and is adequate to achieve the city's transportation goals, including the provision of vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian infrastructure to current standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stern. I appreciate the concise description, particularly of the relief that's being sought in this case compared to what is being allowed as of right under the current zoning. So we have the applicant team with us here, Nico and Tim from Foten, as well as the owners from Rohit, I assume. Can you, sorry, who is going to make a presentation for the applicants?
Good morning, Chair. It'll be me.
Welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Great, thank you. I have some slides that were prepared, if they can be put up on the screen. Thank you. So Lisa Stern just provided a very good overview of the project and the requested zoning amendments in her own presentation. So I'm actually going to jump ahead in my own presentation to address some specific items that I understand have been brought up as concerns. So if we can move forward to slide 4, please. Thank you. This is an excerpt of the site plan of the proposed development. And I just want to point out a few things. The proposed development is oriented toward the front along the future widened Carling Avenue right-of-way. A conveyance of the property's frontage along Carling of up to nearly 4 meters in depth is being provided to the city to account for a required right-of-way protection. So you see Carling Avenue, the existing roadway, and then a fair amount of blank space just to the south of that. That is as a result of the required right-of-way conveyance. Again, despite that, we're doing our best to orient the buildings toward the front in order to provide generous rear yard setbacks. So there's a small portion of the east building that will have a minimum setback of 7.9 meters, which is still in excess of the requirement of 7.5 meters. That being said, the majority of the built form is providing rear yard setbacks in excess of 17 meters to, again, provide an effective transition to the low-rise residential properties to the rear. If I can move ahead to slide 7, please. I understand that there have been written submissions to the committee regarding the right-of-way width and the requested front yard setback reductions. So I just want to be very clear. This project will not reduce the existing right-of-way width along Carling. As previously mentioned, roughly 3.4 to 3.9 meters along Carling will be conveyed to the city for a widening of the right-of-way. What we did request was a reduction in the widening itself. Now, Carling Avenue is identified as requiring a protection of 44.5 meters at this height, but through further discussion with the city, we determined that a 37.5 meter right-of-way protection at this height is an appropriate width. We obtained that permission to reduce the widening to locate the building closer to Carling, and as I previously mentioned, provide more of a rear yard buffer. Several city-approved cross-sections for arterial roads through the Building Better and Smarter Suburbs initiative show that active transportation lanes and landscape boulevards can be comfortably accommodated in a right-of-way of less than 37.5 meters. I do have some slides at the end that if we have time, I'd be happy to illustrate those right-of-way cross-sections. Lastly, the front yard setback and landscaping reductions would not even be required for this rezoning were it not for an irregular lot line condition along Carling Avenue in the northwest corner of the property. Moving forward to slide 8, please. I just want to highlight a few transition measures that we incorporated into the design. Again, to provide a good transition to the low-rise buildings to the rear. Again, we're locating buildings close to the front of the property along Carling Avenue, which allows us to provide generous rear yard setbacks and abundant landscaping, including retaining a hedge that is along the rear property line. We're providing a step back after the east building's 5th story. And although FOTEN considers an angular plane diagram to be only one of many tools that can appropriately measure transition between different heights, in this case, we can confirm that the proposed development meets the angular plane. So moving on to the next slide. At this time, I'm happy to field any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Nico. Do any members of the committee have questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you very much for a good focused presentation. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. I think that's very helpful. This is a section of Carling Avenue that has yet to be developed. So it's further west, and so this is precedent setting, and I understand the residents' concern given that fact. I appreciate what you're showing us, and I appreciate the fact that we had a site visit with members of the community, the executive of Crystal Beach Lakeview at the time, to illustrate it as well. I would like to sort of I'm going to be asking staff about that as well. I don't think anyone underestimates my concern for cycling infrastructure, and to make sure that we have enough right of way, and the fact that this is precedent setting because it's a newer development in this area. So I just wanted to say I appreciate the emphasis that you've put on that, because that is important to show the concern is real, and we want to make sure that it's well understood that this is something that is not going to take away from future development of our active transportation network. But while I have you, one of the things that stands out to me is the lack of bike parking. So I'm hoping that that can be increased, because I know that's not for the zoning, but I think that that should be looked at so that we can show the concern and the interest that you have in for your future residents on cycling infrastructure.
If I may, Chair, I'm assuming that was that a question to be answered?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair, I would like to note that the proposed development is providing a 1-to-1 bike parking ratio. As I recall, we'll certainly make sure that that's the case, or that we are providing a comfortable amount of bike parking through the site plan control process. It's perhaps not shown on the site plan since the majority of it is located indoors. So for that reason, you don't necessarily see it on the site plan, but I can assure you that the provision of sufficient bike parking has been front and center in our minds as we've moved forward with this proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. Are there any other questions for the applicant by members? I don't see any. We have two public delegations. Louis Auerbach is up first. I'm not sure if he is here in the room. Come on up and take the seat at the end of the table. And Rick Nelson will follow Mr. Auerbach at the conclusion of this presentation. Welcome to Planning and Housing Committee. Welcome to Planning and Housing Committee. You have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee, at which point members may choose to ask
have I pressed the right button? You're hearing me? Okay. Because I've never done this before. So my basic position is that the existing zoning already allows for significant intensification needed for additional housing. And what one does not want is something that, as a result of zoning exemptions, will be an eyesore and an unneeded precedent in terms of setback and height in this part of the city. So I'm going to concentrate my remarks on the setback issue. A bit of my background: I live in the neighborhood on the north side of Carling, and I'm on the executive of the Rocky Point Homeowners Association. Our organization supports the intervention of the Crystal Beach Association. I've chaired a couple of affordable and supportive living organizations, Tamir and Options Bytown, in the past. So I wish, I guess it's not going to happen, this committee would require and support projects like this to include affordable housing. Professionally, I'm now retired. I worked for several federal organizations, including being a producer of ideas at CBC and a director of various audit reports for the Auditor General of Canada. And in those roles, I was, and I still am, a kind of big picture guy, which explains quite literally why I'm concentrating on setback and height. And I'd like the committee to know that just as a citizen, despite my postgraduate education, I found the documents difficult to understand, and they were not clear about some pretty basic issues, which have been explained a little bit this morning, such as how far the proposed building would be set back from the sidewalk in Carling. So I'd like to express my appreciation to Lisa Stern, who was able to answer these questions. I had some questions on pretty short notice because they weren't clear from the documents. Just one example. It was stated in one that the minimum front yard setback required is 3 meters, provided is 6.125 meters. Yet the zoning exemption was requested to lower the setback to 1.5 meters. Didn't make any sense to me. But Ms. Stern explained that this is due to some minor issue at the west edge of the property, which was not clearly explained in the provided documents. So I asked her, well, how far will the buildings actually be from the sidewalk, and how this compared with the apartment complexes that will be on either side of it? And she replied, the apartments to the west are set back approximately 20 meters from the existing sidewalk. The apartments to the east are set back approximately 13 meters from the existing sidewalk. And as for 3430 Carling, she stated the building will be approximately 9 meters from the existing sidewalk edge. And as you saw from the diagram, it's pretty darn close to Carling. It's much too close and literally out of line with what exists along that part of Carling. I urge the committee to, in whatever approval, if any, you give this project, that you explicitly require the building to be set back midway between the setback of the two existing nearby multi-residences. In other words, it should be at least 16 meters from the existing sidewalk, not 9 or even fewer. And so my plea to this committee is not to set a bad precedent by approving a building which is much higher and closer to the edge of Carling than anything west of the apartments near Bayshore and Carling all the way into Canada. And whether or not you permit it to be 6 stories, I think you will, and higher than anything else for miles in either direction. A building setback of 16.5 meters from the sidewalk will at least make it kind of a diagonal line with the setback of the nearby apartment buildings, because it won't shut out. It won't be much of an eyesore, and literally out of line with everything else in the neighborhood and beyond. Thank you.
Mr. Robert, thank you very much for your presentation. I think members may have some questions around the rationale. Does anyone have questions for the delegation? Councillor Kavanaugh?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Louis, for coming out today and taking the time. And I appreciate your concern for it. It is precedent setting. This is something we're going to see more of as we look at intensification. And I know that you understand that, and we'll probably see more. We'll see more buildings. This is not a part of town that has seen this kind of development. And as you pointed out, 6 stories is as of right for this property. But your concern is the frontage and the closeness to the sidewalk. Is there specific concerns that you have about that? Is it related to the fact that it may, that it might crowd out, or what is the specificness of
well, there are 2 things. I mean, one's just the visual thing. What does it look like? And we've got some nice multi-residential apartment buildings with a nice setback. So what's it going to look like as you drive along Carling? And the other thing is, the closer it gets to Carling, as Carling gets busier and busier, does it leave you room to literally to put in bike lanes and that sort of thing? So there's an aesthetic issue, and then there's a potential future issue in terms of traffic patterns.
Yeah, I share your concern for future active transportation development, for sure. And this is a question I'll be asking to staff directly.
And I didn't mention public transit, where the
yes,
bus stop's going to be and that sort of thing. It's all
absolutely.
part of it.
That's what I want to make sure of as well. I think that's important to see that we've got that if we're going to have intensification, that we have that infrastructure and the space for that infrastructure. So I'll be asking about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. I believe Rick Nelson is the second public delegation on this one. Mr. Nelson, there you are. I see you on screen. You can take yourself off mute and you'll have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Okay. Making a comment on the last speaker, one of the problems with the sidewalk is too close to Carling Avenue. So what happens in the wintertime is the sidewalk snowplow throws the road on snow on Carling. The Carling sidewalk or snowplow throws it back on the sidewalk. And the end result is we lose half the right-hand lane on Carling. So the sidewalk is too close before we even start. Another concern with this location is this is on a corner. It's on a curve. People getting out of the gas bar, turning left, will have to look past this building and dodge the 80 to 100 kilometer speed limits that vehicles constantly go on Carling Avenue. So I think the whole thing of Carling Avenue, the look, the safety aspects, the whole road is a disaster right now, looking for a major accident. As someone pointed out earlier, there was one a few years ago where somebody went through a condo window down by Acres Road because they're going too fast. Another concern I'd like to mention is people keep talking about that you can put a 6-story building in because the zoning on both sides allows it. I've gone back and checked all the zoning, and what I am discovering is what was done back in 2010 or so when they did the amalgamation and the rezoning. There's a lot of classical mistakes made. I looked through Nepean zoning, and typically Nepean zoned mental complexes, which is what we're talking about here. Nepean never put a height limit on them, but put a limitation that the setbacks to neighborhood properties must be 1.5 times the height limitation. I've gone to the Ottawa zoning, and almost every Minto location in the PN is now zoned R5A with a height limit of 34 meters. That includes Bayshore, Meadowlands, all these things. My position is that these zonings are not correct. The zoning in every case along Carling Avenue is 4 stories or less. Meadowlands is the same way. And also the new official plan specifically says that the allowed building form here should be low rise, not mid rise, not high rise. So one of the questions I have is, how do we reflect the intent of the zoning application that the PN provided back in the, I don't know, back in the 1970s or 80s? And how do we undo some of these zoning mistakes we have right now? I know when we talked about the official plan, the previous head of planning said that if the new official plan was more restrictive than what was there before, then the new official plan would take over. But in this case, they're using the old official plan to justify the same height in the new official plan. So my question is, how do we handle this inconsistency between what was there before and what the new official plan is trying to reflect? The other thing I'd also like to point out is, and that is, this site has on it 3 very nice cedar trees at the northeast corner. These trees are all mature, nice big trees. They're all going to be destroyed by a developer because he's putting the building so close to Carling. Where is the city, or when is the city going to start being respectful of green canopy and stop this destruction of mature trees? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nelson. I know Councillor Kavanaugh has some questions for you.
Thank you, Rick, for coming out today. I appreciate it. I know you've been following it closely, and you know the history of zoning in the what used to be Nepean and now City of Ottawa, and it was a mishmash. I get that, and these are questions that I can ask to the planners when we have a chance to ask that, because I know that you've looked into it heavily, and also in terms of the cedar tree at the corner, I know that these are being considered, and with our tree bylaw, we're very careful to, if there's a need to take out a tree, that we have a policy to replace them 2 to 1. I know it's with newer trees, but that's important. So those will be looked at. I don't know if there's any further questions you'd like me to ask city staff.
Well, I guess the only problem I have here is we're setting a precedent by using the existing zoning to overrule what's in the new official plan. And that scares me, because that could be used anywhere along Carling Avenue now where the zoning is suspect. For example, the townhomes in Bayshore are all zoned to be 34 meters high, all the townhomes. Does that mean the Quarry Village can tear them all down and build 34-meter towers tomorrow? It seems like it, but that's not the intent of the official plan. So when we have this mismatch between what the intent of the new official plan is and what was there before, how do we resolve this? And this is setting a precedent, unfortunately.
And of course, we are looking at more intensification throughout the city. So
okay,
that's part of it. Okay, thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Rick, I don't see any other questions for you. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
I don't believe we have any further public delegations. Does anyone have questions for staff? Councillor Brockington and then Councillor Kavanaugh.
Just wondering if my colleague would like to go first, given that you're the local councillor. Teresa? Oh, okay. Just a few questions for staff. If I understand correctly, the permitted height of this property is 6 stories in nature. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And in your discussions with the proponent, did you talk about or encourage them to build taller than 6 stories?
No, I did not.
Okay. Can you just explain your thinking as to why on a major arterial road with its proximity to both the Moody and Bayshore LRT stations on a road that has OC Transpo bus service, thinking long-term, this apartment building is going to stand there for half a century or more, why we wouldn't be thinking about building taller buildings with greater density?
The zoning permissions on the site provide for 6-story buildings. The official plan provides for gentle intensification in neighborhood areas that are outside of close proximity to transit. This site is over 1 kilometer walking distance to rapid transit. And as such, gentle intensification is appropriate, looking at things like an angular plane to provide an appropriate transition to the sites behind. And that was the rationale for the decision on the application.
Excellent. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Kavanaugh?
Thank you very much, Chair. And just for Councillor Brockington's knowledge, it was originally 9 stories, first proposal. So taller, skinnier. And after our community meeting, they heard the feedback that was just too much for the residents, so they lowered it to 6. But it's more of a block. It's got the same number of units roughly. So that's what happened. But anyway, questions for staff. You heard from Mr. Nelson and the concern about what was there before and what is there now for the zoning. Can you give us a little explanation of that transition?
I can't speak to the transition. The zoning bylaw has been in place for quite some time now, but zoning gives a property development rights. And if there is zoning on the property that allows 6 stories, the applicant is able to come through with a Planning Act application called a site plan control, where we're looking at site design, but we're not looking at heights and massing. Development permissions are given by the zoning. So what is in place today is what we are reviewing under.
Thank you. So we've heard the concern about possibly having it. Both cases, both delegates talked about the sidewalk being too close to the road. That there's not enough allowance for pedestrians. And I think that's something that's very important to emphasize if that's a priority, that we're giving pedestrians a priority in that area. This is going to be walking distance of the D&D headquarters, which is massive. Many of those residents will be walking. Right now, there's not a sidewalk for part of it. We'll work on that. But where we can control it, I want to make sure that we have enough sidewalk, that it's comfortable, that it's wide, and also that we have the possibility of cycle tracks on both sides of the street. Right now, we have a MUP on the north side, which will not be adequate, and that we will need cycle tracks in the future, and possibly even a bus lane for that end. We have to think forward, and is there enough allowance for that?
A proposed 37.5 meter total right-of-way, which is what will be provided once the conveyance with this site is achieved, is a standard urban arterial, which would allow for street trees, cycle lanes, sidewalks, as well as traveled roads. So the right-of-way allowance is sufficient to provide infrastructure in this area. As for the location of the sidewalk and the and upgrades to Carling, as this is an arterial roadway which serves the larger community, it will not be upgraded with this application. It would be something that would be at the expense of the city in the future, should we wish.
Yeah, we understand that, but we need to know that it can be done because the allowance is there, that we've allowed enough space for expansion.
Correct. There is sufficient space for adequate infrastructure, including sidewalks both sides and cycle lanes.
Would you compare it, say, to Carling Avenue, say around Carlingwood? What would be? I know I'm kind of throwing that at you.
Yes. I can't speak to what is included in that specific cross section, but again, the standard urban arterial identified in the official plan and in our standard cross sections is 37.5 meters.
Yeah, I want to know that is what we would have for where on Carling Avenue, we're proposing bus lanes. And it's not being proposed at this far end of Carling, but it could be in the future. So I want to make sure that we have that space.
Transportation has advised that there is adequate space for the infrastructure that is required in this area, which would be vehicle traffic lanes, cycling infrastructure, sidewalks, again, utilities and street trees. There's no bus rapid transit planned at this time or in the future, dedicated lanes for bus rapid transit at this location at this time or in the future at this location. This is beyond where Richmond turns down south, and most of the transit will be on the east side of Carling, heading down to the LRT along Richmond.
Okay, what we don't want is to put an emphasis on vehicle traffic. So we want to make sure that that is not emphasized. And I know this is not, you're a planner, not a transportation planner, but I think we need to know that the allowance is focusing on that active transportation aspect when we make these decisions.
Correct. There is sufficient space to provide pedestrian and cycling infrastructure in the right-of-way provided.
Okay, thank you. There was mention about cedar trees at the corner. What is the story with that?
There are 3 or 4, I think they're white pine trees located at the corner of the site, where the eastern corner of the building is at the front, and they will be removed as a result of development. As is typical with development applications, a tree conservation report was submitted and reviewed by the city forester, and they are looking to see that the removal is absolutely necessary. There's no way around it. And they're also looking to see that there's adequate compensation provided. The city forester is satisfied with the proposal and satisfied that there will be appropriate compensation provided on the site in additional tree plantings.
Oh, thank you. And the hedges with the neighbors behind will be preserved? I think
the hedges with the neighbors behind will be preserved, as well as the hedge on the east side. The hedge on the west side will be removed.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor Lowe?
Thanks, Chair. Further thinking this might be a site plan thing, but we'll see. Are there any plans in the location, given this is a denser development and the reason why a lot of these buildings are closer to the road nowadays is just changes in the way that a lot of these developments are done, whereas before the focus was on where the parking lot was. Are there any plans to include some form of crossing across Carling Avenue? Because you have 2 bus stops at Ullswater and Crystal Beach, I think. And for residents or passengers to get off the bus, let's say, on the north side of Carling to get to this building, it doesn't look like a very attractive crossing. And I think the same can be said for cyclists wanting to cross over to the north side of Carling to the MUP.
It's not something that's been proposed at this time. I can certainly ask transportation to review and provide a response at the site plan stage.
Great. It is a site plan thing. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. I don't see any other questions for staff. Is this item carried? Thank you very much. Thank you very much to staff. Good work. We already passed Bell Street, which brings us to 729 Ridgewood Avenue, I believe. Kelly, am I right on that? Oh, thank you, Kelly. So this is a zoning bylaw amendment to bring 729 Ridgewood Avenue to permit a low to high-rise mixed-use development, including 444 residential units, as detailed in the report. This is in beautiful River Ward. So what I'll do is ask, I believe Kelby is here to provide a staff. No. Lily.
Good morning, Chair. Kelby is joining from his phone. He got some physical challenges to attend the meeting in person. I can provide the presentation on his behalf.
Why don't you go ahead, Lily? Thank you. So we'll get that staff presentation before moving on to the applicant and delegates.
So good morning, committee members and the chair. The property to be discussed today is for 729 Ridgewood Avenue. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the property is in the Riverside Parks community on the north side of the Ridgewood Avenue. It's currently a single-story commercial plaza with a significant amount of the land being dedicated to surface parking, especially for the area along Ridgewood. Next, please. Surrounding the property to the immediate east and the northeast of the site are current residential, low-rise residential areas. To the further east are several residential buildings of 6 and 10 stories. Immediately to the west of the property is a 12-story residential tower known as the Dunbury. And to the northwest is a 5-story St. Patrick's home. Across the road from Ridgewood Avenue is existing church and associated hall and a parking space. Next slide, please. It should note the property is dedicated as neighborhood in the outer urban transact of the official plan. The site is actually very close to a minor corridor and evolving neighborhood destination. Next slide, please. Thank you. The property is about 100 meters away within walking distance to Riverside Drive, which is a major transit priority corridor in the city. It is also in walking distance to existing OC Transport stops, about less than 20 minutes walking distance to the future Municipal LRT station. Next. Across the road of Riverside Drive is a Municipal Park, which is a major city district park with various recreational facilities, playgrounds, and a beach. Next. The proposal is for a development, a mixed-use development of 4 buildings with 444 residential units and associated parking space and a bicycle parking. Next, please. So the proposal has evolved over time since the original submission. At the first time of submission, the applicant was proposing for 5 buildings on site with building heights ranging from 7 to 25 stories. At the time, the courtyard was fully concealed from Ridgewood Avenue. Over time, through the technical review, UDRP and a public consultation, the proposal has been revised to the current design, which is 4 buildings on site, a 2 4-story buildings, and 1 6-story buildings, and 1 20-story tower. The building massing has been broken up, especially along the Ridgewood Avenue, and provide opening and access to the internal courtyard. Setbacks along all directions of the periphery of the property has been increased to provide the proper transition and opportunity for landscaping. Next, please. So the site is not within the urban design review priority area. However, the proposal went to an informal review with the UDRP, given the scale and the proposed changes that the applicant is seeking. The UDRP's original comments was also concerned with regards to the building height, street frontage along Ridgewood. So those comments have been addressed through the revision of the proposal. The UDRP was also generally supportive of the proposed landscape plan. Thank you. So the current zoning for the property is a GM1 with a floor space index of 1.0. The applicant is proposing a GM zone with customized exceptions for the proposal. That includes to add apartment high-rise as a permitted use, to reduce minimum required parking from 1.2 space per unit to 0.95 space per unit. Building heights will be defined and the setbacks be specified according to the schedule here. There are also other exceptions being requested, such as permit rooftop projection for building 2 or area B in order to allow amenity space. Other exceptions are minor and the staff consider them as reasonable. So after the application review, staff come to the conclusion that this proposal presents an opportunity to redevelop an underutilized commercial plaza. The proposed land use contains a small portion of the commercial, and the most part is for residential, and this land use is consistent with the provincial policy statement and official plan. The design has been modified and evolved to be more compatible with the existing low, mid, and high-rise buildings abutting the property. The site is in close proximity to River Center Drive, which is a transit priority corridor, and a Moose Bay and a major green space. And this meets the OP policies to encourage intensification housing provision in those locations. The applicant also commit to a large portion of the large dwelling units, which is welcomed by staff and encouraged in the official plan. The applicant also made refinements to the proposal to address UDRP, city staff, and the public concerns. So in the end, the high rise is located at a location with the least impacts to low rise residential areas, and exceptions are reasonable. So staff recommends approval. That concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zhu. And we'll have an opportunity to ask staff questions after the applicant and public delegations. I am going to ask, I believe Councillor Brockington has a motion that is somewhat administrative in nature. Councillor Brockington, did you want to read that out now?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to formally add my comments to the staff report, whereas the ward councillor's comments were inadvertently omitted from the report on this item. Therefore, be it resolved that the comments by the ward councillor section of the report be replaced with the text as you see on the screen. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. We'll again put a speaker list together for that particular amendment. So on behalf of the applicant, I believe Mr. Beebe will be making a presentation. Good morning, Tim. You've got 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chair and committee. Thank you so much. I'll just introduce my team before I get into it. I'm here today with the lead architects on the file, Frank Puentes and Aaron Januszewski, as well as the representative from the owner, Jean-Luc Rivard from Brazil, and my colleague, Jillian Simpson from FOTEN. We're representing Brazil on this file for the zoning application. I know Lily covered a lot of the planning context, so I will be brief in that sense and try to cover other aspects of the proposal in terms of our approach, in terms of compatibility and community fit and context appropriate development. And I welcome questions at the end of the presentation if I've missed anything, if you require clarification. Next slide, please. So as you have heard, the project is at 729 Ridgewood Avenue. It's in close proximity to a number of important community, recreational, employment, and transportation services. Importantly, as Lee mentioned, it is less than 20 minutes, 17-minute walk, 5-minute bike or 5-minute bus ride to the Moose Bay LRT station, as well as the future baseline BRT station. So many options for alternative forms of transportation. Next slide, please. Also, as mentioned, and this is important in terms of the official plan designation, which I'll talk to in a minute, of a neighborhood designation, there are a number of existing taller buildings in the mid and high-rise category on the site. Important to note that a number of these are from a different era of development and represent what would be called a bar building with significantly larger floor plates compared to the more slender tower design that we're proposing, floor plates up to 1,400 to 1,500 square meters. Next slide, please. Important to note that the surrounding context helped to inform the proposed development and the location of massing and height on the property. Certain considerations included the existing parking garage, which we've aligned the high-rise tower with, you'll see in a moment, to reduce impacts on other more sensitive uses in the area in terms of residential and recreational uses. There's also the undeveloped amenity space to the rear of property. You can see it in this image as a tennis court, which helps provide additional buffering to more sensitive land uses in the immediate vicinity. There's an existing large cedar hedge row. You can see on the bottom of the screen here, which also provides additional buffering from the proposed development to existing parts of the community, and that is going to be retained. And also across Ridgewood, there's an existing institutional building with a large, vast parking lot, which is typically not considered to be a more sensitive use and helps with transition to the broader community. Next slide, please. As was mentioned, the project now, after revisions based on discussions with the community and staff and the councillor, now is comprised of 4 distinct buildings, elements, 3 buildings, including one 20-story high-rise. Attached to that is a 6-story mid-rise building, and then the 2 4-story low-rise buildings with direct frontage onto Ridgewood, which help to appropriately frame the public realm. The drive aisle is central to the site with an interior courtyard. The consolidated drive aisle helps to avoid unnecessary altercations between vehicle and pedestrian access to the site and consolidates it to one area. Next slide, please. As we can see here, the site is accessible via multiple pedestrian access points, and the design characteristics will promote the continuation of the pedestrian fabric along Ridgewood, which is further complemented by the at-grade public-facing amenities or commercial and retail space on the site. The dedicated plaza will be for public and resident access in the center of the site as a portion of the site for amenity and outdoor gatherings. Next slide, please. As was mentioned, there is 444 residential units within the project, over 10% of which are 2+ den and 3-bedroom units. And there's a proposed bicycle parking, which is attempting to achieve the 1-to-1 ratio to help to ensure a healthy modal split, as well as the reduced parking requirements for the site as proposed in the zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. As Lily mentioned, the site is within the neighborhood designation in the official plan. Intensification is encouraged throughout the city to achieve more growth and infill and urban development than otherwise. And in the neighborhood designation, heights of taller buildings above the low-rise profile are promoted where the site is in an area characterized by high-rise buildings and design objectives are achieved. Thanks. I'll skip ahead to slide 11, if you don't mind. As discussed below the proposal, here's the overarching design direction of the official plan. The site is over 13,000 square meters, and using appropriate design and transition measures, we achieve the angular plane, which is, as mentioned, one of many transitional tools that can be used. Next slide here. You can see here that the tower is set back over 11 meters from the property lines into the rear and aligned with the green space and parking garage of the abutting properties. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the existing recreational space, which is associated with the property abutting our subject site, is over close to 40 meters in width, which allows for additional transitionary buffer and provides space between the proposed tower and mid-rise building to the existing residential community. Next slide, please. A number of other elements have been included within the project to ensure compatibility, low rise along Ridgewood, community facing and local retail space. And in general, the proposal represents the development of an underutilized and car-centric site at this moment towards a more compatible infill development. And I should mention, it's a unique aspect of the zoning bylaw provisions that have been provided. The The setbacks have also been included for the underground garage. This is a unique zoning provision that has been included specifically to ensure ample underground soil volumes to allow for tree planting to succeed in more higher caliber and larger canopy trees. Thank you, and I welcome your questions now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bede. Do members have any questions for the applicant? Councillor Brockington?
I don't. All this to say, I've worked with both Brazil and their representative for a number of years, and I just want to publicly acknowledge my appreciation for their commitment to listening to the community and other groups. This proposal has evolved, as a number have acknowledged over the past few years, and I think that while not everyone says it's perfect, a number of changes that have made this proposal much more palatable and good fit for the community. So I wanted to acknowledge that today. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I know we'll be working together on the development near the bus station in my ward. So I do appreciate taking a look at what you put together here. I just have a question because the site is located near Mooney's Bay. It's got strong cycling paths. It's near Carlton. Just wondering why so few cycling bike parking spaces given the number of residents. You've got about 226 and there's 444 units.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. Great question. Yeah, I think we are striving to achieve that one-to-one, which is becoming much more standard these days. That will be further explored through the site plan control process, which is ongoing. It's understood that the site is in a really great location to facilitate active transportation, including cycling, especially along the river pathways. And that is certainly an objective of the development and something that we're exploring currently.
Yeah, that'd be great. Even like an outdoor bike blocker like we have at City Hall. It's made a huge difference in terms of my own personal security. And I know a lot of students worry about getting their bikes stolen. So that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Troster. Any other questions from members? I'll just have one. Councillor Brockington has put forward a motion to add his comments to the record of this. Do you support that?
Very much so, yes.
I was hoping to give the media something on this one. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Bede. We do have two public delegations. First up, Craig Searle, and Mr. Searle will be followed by Elliot Bourgeois. Mr. Searle, are you online?
I am.
Oh, there you are. You have welcome to Planning and Housing Committee. You have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Leeper and fellow committee members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. As a resident of Riverside Park for over 22 years and active in the community as a past vice president and president of the Riverside Park Community Association, I am quite familiar and have been actively involved in many development proposals in our neighborhood, such as the Canoe Bay site, St. Pat's Nursing Home, the YSB Center, the Mooney's Bay Early Learning Center, and further to the south, the prospective Taggart development at Hunt Club and Riverside. With this proposed development in Ridgewood, Brazil has worked well with the community, and their development plan has been revised many times, as we've heard earlier, in a positive way as a direct result of community feedback and Brazil's willingness to listen to the community and amend their plan to better blend in with the neighborhood. This has not always been the case with other developers in our neighborhood. Brazil has also been a very good community partner, having already donated money and space for the community gardens located at this site. We hope this continues. The commercial aspect of this plan is a vital addition to our community and very much needed. I do, however, continue to have concerns about how all these new developments, such as the Brazil development, the St. Pat's expansion, the Norbury, 770 Brookfield, and the Taggart development at Huncombe Riverside Drive, with the increased density, will impact an already congested Riverside Drive. The Parsons transportation study is shown as a draft and is outdated. It mentions at para 2.1.3 that Canoe Bay and 770 Brookfield will have completed, which is incorrect. And there is no mention of the Taggart, YSB, St. Pat's, and Early Learning Center developments, which will add to the traffic volume in their study. I believe their para 3.2.2, which states traffic along the study area roadways is not anticipated to increase drastically, is wrong. The Parsons study also mentions building 1 will be 15 stories, not the 20 in this recent plan. All this will add to the congestion on Riverside Drive. I ask council and the planning committee, what are the plans to mitigate this traffic congestion? Something needs to be done to reduce the speed and traffic volume on Riverside Drive. I personally wish Ottawa can start getting more interesting architecture moving forward. Everything we see is always quite boxy. Having said all this, I wholeheartedly endorse Brazil's application and site plan. I've talked to many other residents in our community, and they also support Brazil's plan. I ask the committee to approve this application and send it to full council with a strong endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig. I appreciate the comments, particularly on the architecture. I think every member of the committee wishes we had a bit more interesting architecture in the city. We're approving lots of high rises, but we're not getting that interesting skyline. Editorial comments aside, do members have any questions for Mr. Searle? I don't see any. Thank you very much for your intervention today, Craig.
Thank you.
The next presentation is from Elliot Bourgeois, who I'm going to assume is online.
Good morning, everyone.
Oh, there you are. Sorry. Welcome to Planning and Housing Committee. You have 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
I promise it won't take 5 minutes. So thank you, committee members, delegates, applicants for allowing me to speak here today. I will be a representative for the small community that will be hiding in the shade of this building that will be going up in the corner of the lot here. So I'm a proponent for everything that the gentleman said before me. I'm a proponent of the densification and of the commercial space being used more effectively. I think it's a great plan. This plan had been revised a few times to our detriment, to the row of houses that is lining this street. Oh, I can't share screen here, but I could show that there's a line of small residential houses behind that tennis court that will be affected by this dominant building in our southern skyline. But it is strictly really to just voice the concern that it would be 20 stories is pretty tall. I think it was originally planning that the high rise was going to be closer to Ridgewood, but the Denbury people were worried that was going to affect their view. Moving the tower to the back end of the lot is going to adversely affect the row house's skyline there. So just a consideration for the committee when they're making their decisions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Legitimately put, obviously. Do any members of the committee have questions for the delegation? I don't see any. Elliot, thank you very much for your intervention today. Do members of the committee have any questions for staff? Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. I do want to follow up on the last speaker's point about shadowing. The location of the tower has always been where it is, while some of the other buildings have been modified with their location and height. The tower was always scheduled to be sort of the north end. The tower height has been changed, 26 stories, 25 stories, now down to 20. A shadow study has been produced. Can you talk to the committee about shadowing the resident? There's a very generous setback to begin with. I think it's 36 meters at the very least, but the residential community to the immediate north, what type of impacts are they going to see with respect to shadowing from the tower?
Thank you for the question, Councilor and Chair. So the high-rise tower, which is a 20-story, will be located on the northwest part of the property and will provide at a minimum 11.5 meters distance from the property line all directions. So that is already kind of offset from the low-rise residential areas to the north of the tenants court. As the applicant pointed out, that the structure you see on the air photo, which is the closest to the high-rise tower, is a parking garage. It's a 5-story parking garage. So there's a reason that both the applicant and the staff and the UDRP felt this is a good location. If we have to put a tower here, this is the location will have the least impact on the surrounding residential areas. So the houses backyard plus the tennis court plus the minimum rear yard setback on the development land that add to more than 30 meters. The shadow study does indicate that the impact on the residential backyards as a result of the towers is minimum. Through the site plan, once the building design is more detailized, the rooftop is more refined. We'll take a more detailed look into the shadow study to minimize any impacts on the tennis court where we can as well.
Just for the committee's knowledge, though, are you able to quantify the impact that shadowing will have on those residential properties that abut the Burgil property line, just so we can, you say it's minimum, I think it'd be worthwhile for the committee to hear that.
Yeah, I'll ask Kelby to jump in. I see he's available. He's is at the airport right now, but thank you for Kelby.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. The shadow study does define the updated building heights and whatnot. Not only were we concerned about the impacts on these low-rise properties to the north, but also questions were raised by the community as far as shadow impacts on the garden area of the St. Patrick's lot as well. And with the shadow study that we were provided, we could see that because of the narrower floor plate of this tower, the shadowing impacts are actually quite minimal in that throughout a lot of the year, the height of the tower doesn't even provide a shadow on these lots. And in times of the year where there is shadowing impacts, the narrowness of this tower results in shadowing impacts of only less than a couple of hours per lot. So from that point of view, the impacts are minimal, and I would say that because of the form of this development, if say building 2, where it's 6 stories, if that was taller, that bar building shape would create more of a shadowing impact. But because the form of this development has taken that high-rise and mid-rise shape, that has minimized the shadowing impacts.
Thank you, Councillor Brockton. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to know if affordable housing was considered for this site, if the applicant was approached on that.
So, Councillor and Chair, a quick response would be no, the affordable housing was not being considered through the zoning bylaw amendment for this application. It is more up to the applicant to evaluate the market and propose anything according to the, whether it's at, below, or above market value.
Has that been indicated? What value this is at? Is this considered to be affordable housing in general, like in terms of that it's not luxury housing? Given that it's near a transit corridor.
So Councillor, the zoning bylaw amendment, staff review according to the official plan policies and the provincial policies. There's no demanding requirement that say they must provide affordable housing for this location. When we look at this proposal, we're considering the access to the transit, the access to a large major amenity space. So those are all important factors to contribute to the quality of the life for the future residents. So that's why we see this as a positive development and improvement to the community.
Thank you. The other concern, I think, is about the fact that it was a grocery store that was there, and it'll be gone. Is this going to create a food desert in the neighborhood? What is the repercussions of that?
So commercial space is contemplated for one of the buildings fronting onto Ridgewood. The ground floor for that building will be dedicated for commercial space. How the developer will market it, I believe it will according to the community needs and the market demand. I would agree a grocery store would be appropriate here.
Okay, thanks. Did the councillor want to add to that?
Yeah, I will acknowledge that we did lose the only grocery store in the neighborhood of 8,000 people, the Country Grocer. And that requires us all to travel out of the community to shop. And as Mr. Searle indicated, there are a number of proposals in this immediate community, other development proposals, where we're trying to leverage opportunities to bring in even small grocery retailers, which are being considered, but market conditions, like everywhere else, are providing a challenge. But with every developer that wants to come into the community, we remind them the types of services and retailers we need, those basic retail, to ensure that people don't have to travel out of the community.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad that that's being looked into. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions for city staff? I don't see any. Is the Brockington motion with respect to adding his comments to the staff report carried? That was close. Is the report as amended carried? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lillian, to you and your team. All right. If I'm not wrong, we are now on to aligning the zoning bylaw 2008-250 with Bill 23. No, I'm sorry, Maritime Way. Robert and Carol were just like, not yet. We're not ready. And I just texted her to tell her we're about to deal with the item on Maritime Way. Lisa, are you ready to do it again? We're in your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a rezoning application at 1200 Maritime Way in Canada. Next site, please. This site is a 1.28 hectare vacant lot located on the south side of Maritime Way, north of the 417 in Canada Town Centre. Surrounding land uses include, to the north across Maritime Way is a 5-story hotel, the Marriott Town Place Suites, a 1.64 hectare lot that's currently vacant, and the Williams Court residential complex, which comprises 5 buildings of 5 to 12 stories in height. To the west is Timberwalk, a recently completed 7-story retirement home, and across Canada Avenue is a main commercial portion of the Canada Town Centre. To the east are vacant sites for development along Maritime Way, beyond which is a stormwater management pond. To the south is Highway 417. Next slide, please. The area is designated town center in the suburban transect. The subject lands are within the boundaries of the Canada Town Center Secondary Plan and are designated as central business district. The Canada Town Center Secondary Plan permits high-rise buildings up to 30 stories at this location. Next slide, please. The proposed development consists of 2 high-rise buildings arranged in a V shape, containing a total of 615 dwellings and 398 square meters of commercial space fronting Maritime Way. The eastern building is 28 stories, the western building is 30 stories, and they are each set on a 7-story podium. Their buildings are connected by an underground parking garage with 617 vehicle spaces and 314 bicycle stalls. Access is obtained from Maritime Way. Next slide, please. It is recommended that committee and council approve the zoning bylaw amendment to permit the development of a 28 and 30-story high-rise building. Next slide, please. The relief requested are with respect to performance standards, the uses are otherwise permitted. It is proposed to remove the split zoning of the property and rezone the entire property in the MC zone, in the mixed-use center zone. Add a new zoning schedule to regulate the maximum building heights and permit 2 high-rise buildings with heights of 87.5 meters, 28 stories, and 93.5 meters, 30 stories, as well as define a podium and building separations. Require 398 meters squared of commercial space at grade on the site. Add minimum front yard and corner side yard setbacks for surface parking. Next slide, please. The height and scale of the buildings was reviewed in accordance with official plan and key design guidelines. This location represents a significant opportunity for intensification in proximity to transit, and the specific policies of the official plan that allow for the consideration of taller buildings have been met. The setbacks provided to surrounding properties and Canada Avenue are consistent with the regulations for high-rise buildings in the zoning bylaw and provide adequate space for sidewalks, facilitate tree plantings within the road right-of-way, and provide active street frontages to create a pleasant pedestrian environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. We do have the applicants here. They do not have a presentation, I understand. Here on behalf of Claridge. Just want to make sure that they are in the room. I see Greg Winters, James Ireland. Do any committee members have questions for the applicant? Actually, before we do that, I should go to the applicants. I know you don't have a presentation. Did you have anything you wanted to share with the committee before we go to questions?
Yes, I would like to make a couple of comments, please, Chair.
Okay, please go ahead, James.
Really just building off of Lisa's very good presentation. The secondary plan for the Canada Town Centre is obviously supportive of 30 stories, which is reflective of its location close to transit and future LRT. I also wanted to expand a little bit on the process through negotiations with Lisa and also with UDRP. Some significant changes were made to the proposal from what was initially submitted to do with the massing, in particular, the heights of the buildings, their locations, and particularly in bringing built form, that single story built form, which is where the commercial, the 398 square meters of commercial, bringing that closer to Maritime Way and activating that frontage and providing some commercial, which wasn't in the initial proposal. Those are the improvements that were made through the process. That's all I have to add.
Wonderful, James. Thank you very much for the additional color on that. We do have one delegation. Oh, sorry. Do any members of the committee have any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you for the presentation or the comments. George Lafreniere is our only public delegate on this one. Good morning, Mr. Lafreniere. Good morning. Welcome to our Planning and Housing Committee meeting. You'll just hit the button on the microphone and you'll have 5 minutes to address the committee when you are ready.
Testing. My name is George Lafreniere. I live at 1025 Canadian Shield Avenue. That is a street that's adjacent to Maritime Way to the north. Today we're discussing a deviation to the height of buildings in the area. For reference, I'm going to call this the Canada City Center because it is part of it. I know it's called the Town Center, but it might be confused with the Canada Town Center across the south of it, which was a disaster. Along Maritime Way, and there are banners posted on the light standards. It calls it Canada Central Zone 7. So for that purpose, I'm including all of the streets at Maritime Way, Canadian Shield, Cordiella, Great Lakes as part of this, and looking at the Canada Town Center as being an area bounding on Maritime Way, Canada Avenue, Campo back down to Maritime Way, which includes approximately 15 buildings at this time, 3 apartments on the northwest corner of approximately 15 stories high, and an old retirement home just about 100 meters east of that of about 6 stories. In the complex on the southeast side or the southwest end, which is the streets I just mentioned, there are approximately at the point now 8 apartment buildings, the tallest being 5-story or being 12 stories, the shortest being 5 stories. There are 3 hotels, 2 within the Maritime area and 1 across, which was already mentioned, so the Holiday Inn. There are at present 2 retirement homes, one that faces on Campo Avenue and one that faces on Maritime Way at the corner, which is well, for all purposes, right beside where this development is going. All of these buildings conform to what I would call the height restrictions that have already been there, and which it seems that all the buildings that are being built and the 3 that are and the 3 sites that are right now under construction are all adhering to the site requirements, which in my mind was put there for a purpose. There must be a reason there was a height restriction put on this area. For the life of me, I can't see why this particular development wants to go up 30 stories when all you have to do is conform and look at what is existing there. And I don't know if any of you have ever walked or traveled around our area, you know what I'm talking about. This is totally out of whack with what's there and what the vision of the Canada Town Center was for. I admit we have no problems with the apartment going up. Everything that they are saying is true. Of course, all the other developments and developers put up came up with the same. It's a great place to be. One of the things they mentioned was the transit site that build it and they will come. Nobody takes public transport out there. I myself came in here this morning. I was the only individual. I left my house at 7:45 to get here. I got here at 25 after 9. I was the only guy that got on the 61 at the corner of Canada and Lord Byng, because that's where they would get. They won't go to the transit station. It's another 15 minutes down the road walking because you can't drive in there. Or you go and park in the parking area, which is really what that transit station is there for. It's not there for the people that are living across the street, believe me. There are only 2 buses that come down here or come into the city, the 61 and the 62 from there, run every half hour. I don't know if that's going to change, but that whole area as far as transit go will completely change once the Moody Drive station is open. So it's a moot reason. people there do not take public transit. I took active transportation. I took that this morning. I've lived there 7 years and I take the bus and I walk. So I have a pretty good idea who takes the bus. And people work Canada North in the high tech area. They work from home now. Everything's changed since COVID. The makeup of the tenants that live in that area. I'm a senior citizen. Probably half of the people that are moving into this area are senior citizens. The other, on my floor, there's 16 apartments, okay? 9 of us are senior citizens. 4 of us are people in their, I would say 40s and 50s, whose lifestyle is apartments now. They're not going to be looking to buy a home. And young people in their 20s and 30s who might be looking to buy a home, but are in an apartment right now, and they work from home. They go to D&D or they go to the high-tech center. Nobody is going to take a transport into Ottawa to work. And nobody takes public transport for recreational purposes, believe me.
You're
traveled enough that I know.
You have a wrap-up comment?
Okay. In conclusion, I think that the 30 stories is totally out of whack with what's being built there and will totally and utterly change the whole area, because as far as I'm concerned, once you allow this, it opens the door. How are you going to stop? And as Ms. Stern said, there's a whole vacant area down there that you could put 5 or 6 more of these monstrosities. So I'm looking at a wall of buildings that are made of glass that have no reason. If somebody could give me one reason why he wants to go up 30 stories, I'll accept it. Can't see one. Anyway,
on that note, I'll need to cut you off there.
I'll bang close. I got more, but that's, I understand.
There are some questions, or a question at least from your Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all the rigmarole here with me getting on this call. I am just down the hall. George, nice to see you. Thanks for coming all the way down here today. You're right in that part of the rationale for this increase in height is because eventually we'll have stage 3 and we'll have a stop there at Terry Fox. With the LRT coming right there, though, do you not see that maybe in the future it'll change people's habits? Absolutely, I agree. People are not using much transit in Canada. You are right. The buses are fairly empty. But when that changes, do you not think that, I mean, a building could stand for 100 years, right? And if we had LRT right, might.
Kathy, we've lost you.
Sorry, I'm just down the hall, literally. Like, I don't know what can you hear me now?
We can. City Hall Wi-Fi.
Yeah, sorry, George. I just said, can you not see that maybe in the future with the LRT right there that the usage of transit might change?
No.
Okay. Our predictions are such that it would be much more used, but I can appreciate that. It's hard when there's nobody on the buses right now. Thanks for coming though, George.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry. Are there any other questions from members? Councillor Gower, Vice Chair Gower?
I always have to bring this up when I hear, sorry, Councillor Curry, a blanket statement like no one takes the bus in Canada. I can appreciate that perhaps there are specific circumstances around the current apartments where there's lower ridership in other parts of the city. I took a 268 in from Canada and there were no seats left. So it's not as high as we would like, perhaps not as convenient as we would like now, but I always have to push back when I hear nobody takes the bus from X or buses are always empty in X. Thank you, Chief.
I didn't say all the buses were empty, but if you stand in the corner of Lady Byng or Lord Byng and Canada and watch the buses that exit out of there, and they all exit out of there that go in there. Most of them are, I got on, I was the only one in the bus at that station. And that's right where this building is going up. I was the only one. I'm not saying that in the future that might happen, but people, the 417 was clogged right through to Eagleson. So that tells me something. Nobody wants to take the bus unless you absolutely have to. End of story.
No, never mind.
I'm sorry, did you lower your hand? Oh, fair enough. I'm sorry, Councillor Lowe. George, I don't see any other questions for you. Thank you very much for your intervention today. Mr. Lafreniere was the last public delegation, so we'll turn to questions of staff. Does anyone have any questions for staff? Councillor Lowe?
Yeah, I raised my hand a little early. I'm looking at the some of the imagery in the area, and I kind of see an underpass north of the highway underneath Canada Avenue. Part of me thinks that may be set aside for highway widening. Part of me also thinks that may be set aside for future active transportation, future transit. Are you able to speak to that underpass a little bit and talk a bit about perhaps its future use?
There certainly is protections by Ministry of Transportation for future uses. There's nothing planned. Terry Fox Station is, as Councillor Curry mentioned, part of Stage 3 LRT and is identified as a future LRT station in the official plan, and is anticipated that would be the alignment from Moody, Eagleson, and to Terry Fox Station.
Thank you. And just to supplement that as well, the public delegation mentioned something about the zoning there being for this application being out of whack, unquote. I'm looking at the Canada Center secondary plan, whatever it's called, the Canada City Center secondary plan. And that parcel south of Maritime Way is actually for 10 to 30 stories, whereas north of it is for slightly lower. How long has that secondary plan been in place? Does it predate the current official plan? Was it created the last one?
The secondary plan was carried forward into this official plan. It was previously the Canada Town Center special policy area and had some and was carried forward verbatim into the new official plan. I can't remember offhand. There's been the timing. Certainly, there's been plans for high density development in Canada Town Center since the 90s, and heights were updated in the late 2010s.
Thank you. And last thing is just a comment. I want to supplement Councillor Gower's comments about transit usage in the area. The public delegation took the bus 7:45, which is 7:45 a.m., right? 8:15, maybe. Either way, it's during morning peak, and there are a lot of bus routes in the area that specifically divert ridership from there to reduce overcrowding, right? The 61C skips Terry Fox. You have the 61D, which goes straight to Eagleson Park and Ride. You have tons of express buses in the area that give the appearance of, emptier buses, and all that is to benefit the riders on Katimavik Drive, so they don't have to be crowded out by buses leaving Terry Fox full. So it's just a comment to supplement Councillor Gower's comments there. So I really would disagree with those comments about the buses being empty.
You sound like you know what you're talking about. Councillor Curry?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if there are other questions. I just have a number of comments and thanks. Is now the time?
Please do.
So as that delegation mentioned, though, it is very high for the area. And that is what we heard. You got many emails about it over time. This started long ago with Councillor Suds, the consultation. And at the time, things were different, right? Things have changed. And, the community has said this is awfully high, but it fits within the secondary plan allowances now. As soon as we do that zoning review, Mr. Chair, this would come into compliance immediately, right? The high rise is 30 stories. So, but I appreciate the challenges for the community. Certainly, the traffic and parking on the side streets has been an issue, but there is ample parking plus bike parking. It will be close to transit in the future. As I said earlier, like 100 years from now, this will be, the place. But the overall theme I've tried to say to residents, and I will say to you, is if not here, then where? Where do you put 30-story buildings? Well, this is an ideal location. It is different from what's already there, but it is an ideal location. And I think the community generally understands that. You have to appreciate that people who bought there first and moved in here have dealt with a ton of construction, a ton of blasting, all kinds of construction issues. Councillor Kavanaugh knows the reality, right? And it's so upsetting to people. It's unfortunate when you're one of the first to live in an area and then you have to see all the construction around you. So I certainly appreciate the feelings of a lot of people about this building, but it will in time be the right decision. And but the decision time is now. And so I will be supporting this, and I hope you all will, knowing that with these types of things, there always come challenges, but it is the right decision.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry. I don't see any further questions for staff. We don't have any extra motions on this one? Okay, so is the item carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again to Lisa and team for work on that. All right, now. Bylaw 2008-250 with Bill 23. I hadn't anticipated a presentation on this one. Do any members of the committee need any particular clarification off the top before we move into public delegations? No. So what I'm going to do is move straight into public delegations, led by Cheryl Parrott, who is with the Hintonburg Community Association. Did staff want to make any clarifying? We're good?
Yes, that's fine, Chair. We're happy to make comments. I think Dave had some introductory comments he wanted to give, but we
introductory? Okay.
We can put that off if you want to go straight.
No. All right, we're going to move straight into Ms. Parrott's delegation. Cheryl, you're up. Oh. There you are. Good morning, Cheryl. You have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Okay, thanks so much. If you could just please hold the slides for a minute, that would be helpful. So Chair Leeper and councillors, the Hintonburg Community Association urges you to implement restrictions on rear yard parking to prevent these rear yards from being completely paved over during the next 2 to 3 years as the new zoning bylaw is being written. All levels of government are talking about climate change crisis. So we shouldn't be paving over entire yards. Infrastructure management issues are being compounded with much bigger buildings covering much more of the lot and asphalt replacing all permeable surfaces at a very rapid rate. Less than a month ago, a big storm caused major flooding in Ottawa. So if I could have slide 1, please. Our suggestion is a new option 6. Which would be a combination of staff's recommended option 5, which we do support, plus option 4, which would give a minimum 15 meter square soft landscaped area that would be an aggregated amount in a functional rectangular area where a tree might be planted and might survive. This would be far better than a small strip around the perimeter. The R4U zoning requires a similar aggregated rectangular area, but indicated that 25 meters square was required for tree survival. So even though this report looks like it's talking about the tree could survive, it's a bit unclear, and hopefully forestry could provide an answer to that. Next slide, please. We hope that we understand correctly that if the staff recommended option 5 is passed by planning committee, that these rules will actually apply to long semi-detached buildings across the city. A long semi-detached dwelling can now contain 6 dwelling units as opposed to 4. Currently, long semis have not had to provide any rear yard soft landscaping. In Hintonburg, most of these are all on small lots that are 300 meters square or less. Almost all semis in the area have the entire rear yard paved with asphalt from lot line to lot line. Any other building in the R4U zone with 4 units or more on a lot that's under 450 meters square is prohibited from providing any parking, but the long semis have been exempt from this requirement. So in this one, you see they've got probably actually 6 spots in this one between the 2 buildings, so 3 each. Next slide, please. Note the trees and green space in the neighboring properties and nothing on this one. Any building with 3 units or more in the R4U zone must provide a minimum of 35 meters square soft landscaping and ensure an aggregated rectangular area of 25 meters square, which we were told then was the area needed to support the growth of a tree. And 25 meters square is not all that big. It's just a little bit over one of these parking spaces. Next slide. Yet long semis with 4 units have been allowed to cover the entire rear yard in asphalt. So this one shows 6 parking spaces between the 2 buildings and not a stitch of anything green or living anywhere. We believe that long semis should be considered for what they are, 4 or 6 unit apartments, and they should conform to the landscaping requirements for the number of units they have in the associated zone. Next slide. The last few years have shown us climate change in action. Properties with no trees or soft landscaping and no permeable surfaces in the rear will just exacerbate the impacts. Please vote for these interim measures and consider our suggestion to add at least an aggregated area sufficient for a tree to grow before rear yards are completely paved over. The new zoning bylaw must ensure that long semis are required to follow requirements of any other 4 or 6 unit building. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. So I think staff may have control of the screen. You had proposed some specific wording. No, it's okay.
Yeah, to incorporate option 4 together with option 5, which talks about having an aggregated area. So not just 15% that's cover that would be soft landscaping, but also having an aggregated area that's 15 square meters in a rectangular shape that would be a functional rectangle. And using the wording from the R4U zoning, which talks about, I think it's twice as wide as long, but to incorporate that language in so that you have a functional space as opposed to just a strip around the perimeter, which I worked out, I think is about 1.2 meters wide on 1 or 2 sides would be the 15% in a lot in Hintonburg. So to actually have a functional space.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I see Councillor Kavanaugh has a question for you. I apologize, I jumped in there.
Yep, thank you very much, Cheryl, for your presentation. I've already seen examples of that with houses being built that have that long driveway between them, and then the parking is at the back because the city doesn't want parking in the front, and that's good. We've worked hard to make sure that we have a green area on the front, but it is a concern, and I found that also it's about drainage, that people behind those properties are concerned about all the pavement there, and we haven't said that they must be permeable driveways either. So anyway, I'll be asking staff about comments on that. This is something we noticed as well, that this is a concern. So I appreciate your proposal, and I'm just going to throw this out because I prefer trees, but what if we force them to have permeable parking lots? Is that something to consider? I'd rather have a tree. I'll be honest.
Yeah, and that was discussed at the meeting, and I know that there was quite a bit of pushback on that by industry in terms of the cost. We would love to see that, absolutely, that it be permeable surfaces, whether it doesn't have to be permeable pavers, it could be gravel would work. That's going to absorb the moisture, because we do see people in surrounding properties getting a lot of water. It is supposed to be, the drainage is supposed to be there. It's supposed to be graded correctly, and that's not happening. And then trying to get that corrected is years, if at all, and a lot of frustration and asks and nagging, and it still doesn't happen. So preventing it in the first place is the best plan. Absolutely.
And of course, the ideal would be both, to have trees and permeable, of course. But I thank you for your presentation. And I think this is something we should look at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanaugh. Are there any other questions for Cheryl? See none. Cheryl, thank you for your presentation today. Jason Berggraf with the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association is our next presenter. There are 4 in total today. Welcome to the Planning and Housing Committee again.
Thanks very much. Maybe not as short as my first presentation, but hopefully still a little less. Yeah, we worked alongside staff on a number of discussions over these and the options available. We're happy to support option 2 as staff's recommendation for the ADUs. Really want to see those things progress. In terms of the backyard landscaping, of the options, happy to support option 3, which is certainly, the limit of 70% paving on for parking. The reason why we choose 3 over 5, which is staff's recommendation, is to maximize the flexibility of that remaining 30%. You have consideration for patios, pathways, storage for garbage or bicycles or what have you. So we'd like to see a bit more flexibility on that 30%. But ultimately, we want to see this progress and move forward. And you know what? I'll leave it at there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Berggraf?
Realize this is outside of zoning. This has been allowed, even though we don't have a amendment to our bylaws. Creating 2 units on a single lot has been allowed. What do you have any feedback or comments, observations for our committee about how the process has been for builders and developers in obtaining permits to go ahead with this type of development?
I don't have any specifics. What I would say is that members are holding back proceeding with these types of projects until this is settled, right? That there's a hesitation there because you don't want to have to fight on a case-by-case basis about what the rules and what the rules are going to be doing that, and not proceeding with this, despite that the provincial rules would allow that. Then you're having to have that argument over and over again, whereas we're kind of setting the bylaw to facilitate the ADUs, which ultimately will make everything a lot smoother for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Are there any other questions for Jason? Oh.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I wanted to ask you about permeable driveways, because this is something that I'm seeing more and more as being needed. We need that drainage. The asphalt is a problem, and if that can be incorporated in.
Sure. So as the previous delegate did say, permeable paving was brought up as the discussions. It would be certainly, if you were talking about like interlocked, one of our members did a quick calculation on one of the any of the typical kind of pictures that Cheryl had shown earlier, and you're looking at about a $40,000 increase in that kind of cost. We're happy to have those kinds of discussions about maybe what's moving forward, but we'd much prefer to have them in the context of the entire comprehensive zoning bylaw versus just this individual piece today.
Okay, understood. But you see the concern of drainage, because I've already been through this already with new developments that had previously been empty lots, more or less, and then totally paved at the back, which means the person behind them gets runoff. So and the need for trees. What about increasing the capacity for trees at the back?
So you'd ultimately with your 30, if you're doing 70% parking, your 30%, you could split up however you wanted to do that. If you wanted to devote more space to green and to trees, certainly the changes would allow you to do that now. I'd also reference that we are working with the city on the infrastructure side on-site stormwater management to retain, because there's a lot of movement there on smaller projects, which would, if you're increasing roof surface and what have you, they want to start retaining that water on site versus having it go into the stormwater system that's there. So there'll be solutions that will be part of that setup as well, moving forward with the IMP.
Thank you. I think ideally we want water to be absorbed rather than go into the stormwater system, which actually is more of an expense for the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanaugh. Are there any further questions for the delegation? I don't see any. Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our third presenter today, Mr. Robert Brinkman.
Thank you, Chair. Hope you can understand me here well. Good evening or good morning, Chair Leeper and members of the Planning and Zoning Committee. The FCA Planning and Zoning Committee would like to make some comments regarding the Bill 23 implementation into the current zoning bylaw. We support the lifting of the 30% rule for accessory units, as it gives a real chance to create livable additional dwelling units. Allowing entrances to the accessory units on the front of the building will allow greater access for our residents with mobility needs. A shared single entrance would be a preferred solution, but it's not always feasible to implement. Parking in rear yards. This is a hot topic for a lot of our members, as valuable green space is disappearing at a rapid pace. You heard before from Cheryl. It is understood that there is currently no limitation on all, and therefore any intermediate restriction is better than none at all. Option 5, with a 70% parking driveway and minimum of 15% soft landscaping, would be the preferred option. We would like to say a thank you to the zoning group with David Wise, Robert Sanders Scott, and Carol Woody for the open discussion between staff, the industry, presented by Goba and us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Robert. And I apologize. I just read off the paper really quick introducing you. It is Robert Brinker, of course, with the FCA. Are there any questions for Robert this afternoon? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Brinker, for your intervention. And we'll move on to no stranger to the committee, Heather Pearl with the Champlain Park Community Association. Heather, welcome to committee. You have 5 minutes to address.
Hi, I have a presentation. Okay, so like many people in the more densely developed neighborhoods in Ottawa, I'm really concerned about the whole heat island and stormwater issues. And I think that these should be considered right at the beginning when you decide to craft changes to zoning. Now, regarding the options for addressing parking in rear yards, my point is once permissions are given, it's hard to remove them. So how does this work with the heat island stormwater issues? Next slide, please. Okay, so this is from 2019, and it shows the heat island effect. Mitigation is critical, and the zoning bylaw and tree bylaws are tools that could help control heat and poor air quality. The new OP policies, part 4 and 10, support controls. We can continue to do nothing, and then we end up with our new abnormal frequent violent weather events, polluted air, windstorms, summer and winter rainstorms, ice storms, blizzards, power outages, tree losses, property damage, insufficient sewer and stormwater capacities to control overland flooding, streets undermined by water, drinking water quality affected, novel pathogens, food insecurity as arable land, and even backyard gardens are consumed by buildings. Mental and physical health is compromised. Healthcare costs are already skyrocketing. The impacts are the greatest on very young, the elderly, people with medical conditions, income insecure, new Canadians, construction and farm workers, etc. Next slide, please. This just kind of confirms what that the heat island and tree canopy really do sort of come together. In 2017, the tree canopy in Champlain Park and surrounding area generally concords with the hotter and cooler areas in the 2019 heat island map. The coolest areas have both street and rear yard trees. Next slide, please. So everyone lives on a watershed. Problems with water start on the land. And this is a picture of showing that the inner urban transect overlies the drinking water intake protection zone, IP2, and it's the vulnerability is measured on a 10-point scale and shows how quickly water and pollutants move from the surface to the aquifer. A high vulnerability area has a score of 8 or 10. IPZ2 includes the on and offshore areas where flowing water and any pollution would reach the intake pipes within 2 hours. So, stormwater runoff, volume, and associated pollutants are now an ongoing problem for Champlain Park, Kitchissippi, other Ottawa residents, and the Ottawa River water quality generally. In many parts of Ottawa, the naturally limited permeability, limestone bedrock at or near the surface, means that the climate change induced increasingly frequent summer and winter extreme rain events overwhelm storm sewers and undermine streets. We've had a huge volume of large footprint intensification since 2007, with trees removed, severely reduced available permeability. The development already exceeds the capacity of the stormwater and sewer systems. We saw this just this summer. We've had a lot ongoing for the last few years. On July 28th, a series of severe supercell thunderstorms created flash flooding, hail, power outages, tornadoes, major damage to homes and vehicles. My vehicle was one. August 10th, 77 millimeters of rain fell in a few hours, flash flooding, power outages, sanitary sewers, regurgitated contents into many homes, major damage to homes. The combined sewage storage tunnel has only been in service since 2020. I recognize that the volume of discharge would have been much worse without it, but this is faint praise. More big storms are inevitable. We need an integrated approach. Let's build green infrastructure requirements into any zoning bylaw that we have. Next, please. So, options for addressing parking in rear yards. So, do what we're proposing promote development of safe, healthy streets and spaces, or are we promoting a city where no one can be outside in the summer due to hot, polluted air, or in winter due to icy sidewalks and encroaching vehicles, or wild weather in any season? Will the kids have a safe, healthy streets and places to play? That there's attractive outdoor space for people of all ages and abilities. Ottawa cannot afford to replace sanitary and stormwater infrastructure. How can people be expected to accept repeated sewage events? I cannot get the image out of my mind of sewage exploding out of toilets and sinks and bathtubs all over Ottawa in August. So how are we going to build a city going forward to mitigate these uncomfortable realities? We consider the 3 preceding maps showing our heat island, tree canopy, and water intake protection zone as report card. They tell us we have a long way to go to mitigate damage that's already been done. Bylaws and builders are not yet considering the increasing number of wild weather events. Damage and associated costs will escalate for everyone if our bylaws do not take climate change into consideration. And really, the development community greatly benefits from upzoning and fewer bylaw restrictions. In return, they need to incorporate green building and green infrastructure into their project plans. In this particular case, while allocating significant outdoor space to parking should not be a first consideration anywhere, Allowing it in the more densely populated transects, just because it might be desirable in outer urban and suburban transects, proves that the one-size-fits-all does not work everywhere and will cause harm, as shown in the 3 preceding slides.
Heather, you're well over time now. I need to cut you off there. We've got the slide up on the screen, which I'll ask to be left there. And I'll ask whether members have any questions for you. I don't see any. Heather, we'll ask a question. There are several options for how to address rear yard parking in the staff report in front of us, and they're seeking our guidance on which option to go with. Obviously, I'm sorry, I forget which number it is, number 2. We've 5. The staff recommendation is in favor of option 5. The builders have suggested option 3 would be better. What is your view on that?
Well, I would go with Cheryl's option, but I would add that we only allow it if all surfaces are fully permeable. Require this now. Allow only if a significant space is retained as green space with room for trees to thrive. Require this now. It's not valid to argue that providing green space adds to an owner's cost to maintain a property. Trees, green space, permeable surfaces, soak-away pits, etc., have to be considered part of the ongoing cost of doing business responsibly. I'd be willing to sit down with GOBA and sit down and start talking about what options we could consider to make this better, because we do have to make this better.
Fantastic. And I fully agree. And I'm going to be asking staff about some of the other processes. Right now, I am concerned that it's not a holistic look at how to deal with the built form of an intensifying city and extreme climate change related events. So I'll be asking some questions to staff on that. Heather, thank you very much for the present. Oh, let me just make sure I'm not missing anyone. Thank you very much for your presentation today, Heather.
Thank you.
There are no further delegations. Do members have questions of city staff? I don't see any. Yeah, I'm sorry, Teresa, if I could just ask you to get that hand up on the screen fairly quickly. No worries. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, staff. You've heard from the delegates and I share the same concerns. And is there any way to make, for example, having permeable driveways as part of this plan? Can we consider the option that was proposed by Ms. Parrott?
Well, thank you, Chair. We always have to remember that these are interim measures. There's a lot of other moving pieces that are going that are working at the same time. This is in conjunction with the Urban Forest Management Plan. We'll be starting the urban tree planning strategy fairly soon. This is also in conjunction of working with the Infrastructure Master Plan as well. As Jason Bergdorf noted, we have some of those recommendations coming through now. In the report itself, we have noted that staff are considering a couple of other regulations as well. One of them would be looking at permeable paving required for all parking spaces plus approaches to those parking spaces. So that's within the report is a regulation that we are strongly considering. The other regulation that we're also strongly considering is providing and requiring that 1.2 meter buffer to also be required there as well to make sure that there is in fact actually a spacing distance around those parking areas that might be provided. So those would be above and beyond whichever those options are that are directed from Planning Committee today. So staff are indeed working on those. We do have some thoughts with respect to that, and we would like to explore those further with our industry and community association colleagues going forward.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Can I ask, in the infrastructure master plan, I believe that we are looking at measures to try to deal with stormwater on site for infill as well. Are you able to provide us with any insight as to how that discussion is going?
Chair, I do have to leave that to our infrastructure master plan colleagues as they work their way through. They are still in discussions with some of those details. I think they believe also have a technical consultant that's also working with them. So I'd have to defer to them to provide some of those details. The intent, though, as we work our way through, is to do as at all possible is for post-development flows to match pre-development flows, i.e. keep as much water on the site as you can to not make the problem worse. There's a lot of different ways in which to do that. The challenge is to make it as cost efficient and as effective as possible so that you're not resulting in additional procedural hurdles for development to move its way through, but so that we have a fairly simple and easy solution going forward.
Fantastic. Are there any other, Councillor Judith?
Sorry, just for my clarity then, today, we're not approving a set in stone plan for rear yard surfaces. We've got a path forward and there's more discussion to come, because I'd be very hesitant to approve that portion of today's report, knowing that there's still infrastructure and tree canopy considerations. There seems to be a lot of moving parts here. So just for my clarity, what exactly, as part of this discussion in the rear yard surface allocations, what are we supporting here today? What are you asking us to approve?
Chair, thank you very much. The challenge that we have right now is we are, to be blunt, in a reactive mode. And we are in a reactive mode because the changes to Bill 23 are in effect now, which means that we have development that is now moving forward under building permit now that can pave 100% of the rear yard. Now, there are indeed discussions that are happening with respect through the comprehensive zoning bylaw process, through the infrastructure master plan process, that will happen through the urban forest management plan process that will work its way through. But right now, we know that we have a challenge. And we know that if we allow development to proceed as it is right now, we will continue to have those challenges. So what we are doing is we are seeking direction on what we should do now to control development as it's moved its way through, and to provide certainty to the development industry as to what those rules are going to be over these next 2 years as we work to find the more comprehensive, holistic solution.
Okay, so it's direction, it's not set in stone, completely unchangeable policy is what you're seeking today.
What we are seeking today is we're seeking direction from committee as to how you would like us to approach the issue of accessory dwelling units within interior buildings, and how you would like us to approach the issue of managing that balance between parking and trees. Now, we will take that direction and we will go back and we will craft a zoning bylaw. And we will bring that zoning bylaw back to committee within 1 or 2 months' time. And we will present the regulations on how development will move forward in the interim period while we craft that larger holistic view of the zoning bylaw. So this is all about how we manage development now. As I said, we are in a reactive mode because Bill 23 is in effect now and development is happening now. But we need to solve this issue and understand with clarity from staff's perspective and from industry's perspective, how we can move forward together so that we can then turn our attention to actually looking at a proactive future zoning bylaw. That's the challenge that we have, and that's the direction that we're seeking.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, because I just don't want us to make a decision today and then find out we've made our stormwater issues worse. We've made any major detrimental decisions regarding our tree canopy. And I'm keeping in mind the fact too, that we're also trying to mitigate street parking, right? Because if we take out the opportunity for any of these spaces in rear yards to be parking, they're going to go to our streets unless they have easy access to transit or their cyclists. So there's a lot of pieces at play here. I'm glad to hear that this is kind of temporary, but not quite temporary, but there's room for improvement and for discussions with our stakeholders and also our communities. I just want to keep in mind, though, that, you know, if we're talking about, we're waiting for infrastructure, if we're waiting for our forestry services, I'd really like to see those considerations, those staff members here, the very next time we have a conversation about this item. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Dudas. I think it's important to note we're providing direction to staff today for how to deal with the inclusion of multiple units on single lots in Bill 23. They're now going to go away and deal with harmonized performance standards, which are relatively uncontroversial. They're going to deal with the how to deal with the principal and additional dwelling units in a way that our building code staff are going to say this is not out of conformity with our zoning, and we are giving them direction to go away with the option 5, which is don't let them pave over the entire back lot for parking. They're going to craft a zoning bylaw for our consideration, which will be in time for the provincial deadline. So that's basically what we're doing today, is guiding them. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. So given that these are interim measures and something more holistic is coming down the pipe, do you foresee, and I know you can't speak for developers or builders, but do you foresee developers and builders waiting until that more holistic approach comes and which can result in a deluge, let's say, of applications to come after that holistic approach is done? And if so, are you prepared to handle that?
Chair, with respect to how the development industry might react to these, it might be best to bring Mr. Burghoff back up to ask him. We can't forecast that. We do know and we do appreciate that uncertainty regarding how you can divvy up the interior of a building, how do you manage the relationship between those various units? That is a challenge that they are currently dealing with. How they can get access to those units with the entranceway requirements, things like that. Those are challenges. Those affect the economics of how you are actually going to be able to develop that home itself. With respect to the options that we've presented, we have had discussions with industry with respect to the 70% parking allowance. As I said, the baseline that is right now is no restrictions at all. 100% of the rear yard can be used for parking. So 70%, basically, in effect, that's going from 3 cars, 3 parking spaces in a rear yard, to 2 parking spaces in a rear yard. So that will be up to a developer as to how they are marketing their development, as to, does this work for them with respect to their pro forma? Those are things that we can't answer. We do understand that in general, they are supportive of the 70% and feel that they can still make that work with the development models that they do have. So that's as much as I could say with respect to what the uptake will be. But the internal uncertainty with respect to the building itself, that is certainly something that is a restriction.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll follow up with the, I forgot his name there. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lowe. So if we adopt the staff recommendations today, they will still be bringing us a proposed zoning bylaw to vote on in a month or so. And then, of course, we're going to have a radically different zoning bylaw as they continue to work through the comprehensive zoning bylaw review. But this is a necessary interim step. I also want to reiterate, I believe it was Ms. Parrott who thanked staff for fostering, it was Robert Binker, who thanked staff for fostering a good, productive dialogue between staff, communities, and the industry. So thank you very much for your work on that. Is this report carried? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carol and Robert, for your work on that. I know it was a lot. So we'll move on to the 2023-2026 Affordable Housing Capital Strategy and Update. I know Paul, Lauren, and Clara are here. Lauren was here. Paul, thank you. Paul, Lauren, and Claire, no, I didn't thank you earlier on the Section 37 report for the contribution to the Ottawa Community Land Trust. I know you were creative in that and you were open-minded in that, and we'll see how that goes. So thank you for your willingness to take a chance with me. I hadn't anticipated a presentation today. This is a fairly routine report, but Paul, can I just ask you how this report today differs from what we might normally see in that we're looking at some multi-year commitments?
Thank you, Councillor Leeper, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Levy. I'm the Director of Housing Services, and I'll be presenting today with my colleague, Lauren Reeves, who's coming to join us. So Housing Services is pleased to present its first term of council capital funding strategy. And the purpose is to provide our not-for-profit partners with a really clear commitment of capital funding towards significant projects that can be delivered during this term of council. And the strategy enables us to really chart a path forward over the next 4 years to provide a larger picture of the investments between 2023 and 2026 to make sure that it's planned, the planned shovel-ready projects significant to the achievement of the 10-year housing and homelessness plan objectives can be achieved. And the recommended investments outlined in the report take into consideration the current trends in the housing and homelessness sector. As you know, there's been a lot of shifts in trends over the past few years, to say the least, during the pandemic, and it continues. We also looked at the current trends in the residential construction industry, as well as the council-approved 2031 municipal housing pledge. So that kind of gives you a synopsis of the backdrop behind our capital funding strategy, which we are presenting for the first time to you today for this term of council. Okay. Slide. Do we have the slides?
Chair, if I could just jump in for a second, would you like a presentation or would you like to just
I'll look
jump
to the
questions?
members of the committee. I hadn't, I wasn't going to insist on this. So I'm seeing some members who are like, yes, we would like to get a presentation. So please go on ahead with the slides.
Thank you. Alors, merci tout le monde. J'aimerais faire le point auprès du comité concernant les projets et les programmes qui ont reçu un financement au titre de la stratégie d'investissement de 2022. L'an dernier, le Conseil a autorisé l'allocation de 30,2 millions de dollars en immobilisation municipale et de 5,4 millions de dollars en financement provincial pour un total de 35,6 millions de dollars. De cette allocation, le projet Dunbar de la Société de logement de Nepean a reçu 7,2 millions de dollars de fonds municipaux et provinciaux pour la construction de 31 nouveaux logements. La construction de ce projet a débuté cet été. Le deuxième projet du Rochester Heights de la Société de logement communautaire d'Ottawa, situé sur la rue Gladstone, a reçu un financement municipal de 10 millions de dollars pour 73 des logements du projet. Les permis de construire pour les immeubles d'appartements ont été délivrés en août de cette année. La somme de 2 millions de dollars destinée au lancement d'une demande de proposition auprès de promoteurs du secteur privé a été annulée par une motion du Conseil et il est recommandé de réaffecter ces fonds dans le rapport de cette année. Le programme de financement Rénovation Ontario a permis d'effectuer 62 réparations et rénovations pour l'accessibilité. Enfin, des fonds en cas d'imprévu d'un peu plus de 15 millions de dollars ont permis de soutenir 211 logements dans 7 projets, notamment les 29 logements avec services de soutien sur la rue Lisgar, qui seront achevés cet automne. I will now pass it on to Lauren to continue the presentation. Thank you.
En anglais.
En anglais.
Thank you. To set the framework for how we've determined the recommendations for allocation of funding that are before you today, we look to the vision and objectives of several guiding documents. Firstly, there's the 10-year housing and homelessness plan, and it provides that 300 to 570 new affordable housing units are needed annually to meet the plan's overall target to create 5,700 to 8,500 new affordable housing options. So that would include housing allowances and benefits as well. So that's between 2020 and 2030. A key component of the plan is that 10% of all new affordable units are supportive housing. The long-range financial plan supports the 10-year plan and assumes that a 1/3 investment from all levels of government, totaling 565 million, will deliver 500 new units per year for that 10-year period. At the 4-year mark now, we're tracking fairly well in terms of investments at 217 million has been invested, with the city's contribution slightly more than its share at 36%. But since 2020, when these plans were put into effect, 403 new units have been completed, which averages to 134 units per year. Of these, 53% are supportive housing, though. There are currently 504 units under construction, 24% of which are supportive housing, with a total of 108 to be completed by the end of this year. So this is all to say that there has been a 51% increase in construction costs since 2020, making it a significant challenge to meet the targets in both the 10-year plan and the LRFP. Over the past 3 years, a large portion of our annual capital funding has gone toward contingency to keep existing projects underway and headed toward completion. But this has certainly limited our ability to fund construction of new units. While we haven't met our overall targets, we have far exceeded the goal of 10% of new units being supportive housing. Pandemic-related funding from the province and the federal government have helped us achieve that. The recommendations in this report will also support the creation of new supportive housing with a minimum of 144 units being funded. Next slide, please. The other two documents that support the vision and objectives for affordable housing include the Municipal Housing Pledge and the Integrated Transition to Housing Strategy. The Housing Pledge was endorsed by Council in March 2023 and has a target of 151,000 new units overall to be constructed by 2031. And within housing services, there are several initiatives currently underway that will contribute to the city meeting this provincially mandated target. These include developing a vacant land strategy that prioritizes city land for affordable housing, as well as an affordable housing pipeline strategy that's being developed in conjunction with our Housing Accelerator Fund application. The Integrated Transition to Housing Strategy is comprised of short to long-term strategies to support people experiencing homelessness with the aim of transitioning them to permanent housing. It also addresses our immediate pressures on the shelter system. The strategy includes the creation of a new supportive housing community hub, which is now being considered for possibly the property at 1245 Kilbourne Place. Capital investments in new housing over the past several years align with the mandate of this strategy. Since 2006, over 700 new supportive housing units have been completed. An additional 123 supportive units are expected to be complete by 2024. Next slide, please. So as Paul mentioned, unlike our usual annual capital plan, this report takes a term of council approach, with recommendation 1 addressing the funding for this year, 2023, and recommendation 2 addressing the funding for the balance of the term of council. So for 2023, the total allocation is 66.6 million, consisting of 16 million city capital, 2 million carried over from last year from a canceled RFP, again, city capital, 18.6 million in federal RHI funding, 5.9 million in OFI, which is Ontario funding, and another 24.15 more recently that came from the province under the Provincial Priority Projects for Municipalities Fund. The recommended allocations in the report will contribute to the construction of approximately 144 new supportive housing units. That does include 90 units that we could develop in the existing building at Kilbourne Place, as well as another 54 units by Salis at 56 Capilano Drive. The funding will also provide contingency toward 408 units that are underway. And that includes 271 units by OCH at Mikinak. Next slide, please. So recommendation 2 is for the balance of the term of council, and that is $50.7 million in funding. It's made up of 45 million in city capital, 15 million for each year of the LRFP under the current LRFP, and then 5.17 million in provincial funding, and that's the only other known funding at this time. So this will fund 339 new affordable units, including 133 units by Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, and that's at the Le Breton Flats project with Dream. Additional funding is needed to fully fund the Capilano project by Salis, just a 2 million or so there. And then over 32 million is recommended to be allocated to OCH for their project at Rochester Heights Phase 2. That's at 818 Gladstone Avenue. And so I'll turn it back to Paul to wrap up.
En 4 présente les projets que nous pourrons mettre en œuvre si des fonds d'immobilisation étaient disponibles. Le personnel a relevé 23 projets représentant un total de 1224 logements abordables et avec services de soutien et une pression financière d'environ 244,8 millions de dollars. D'autres projets peuvent exister dans le secteur et nécessiter un financement de la part de la Ville et d'autres ordres de gouvernement pour être pleinement réalisés. Grâce au fonds pour accéder à la construction de logements, le personnel prévoit qu'environ 1700 logements relevés dans les documents 2 et 4 pourront être soutenus au cours des 3 prochaines années. Toutefois, un soutien financier supplémentaire est nécessaire pour rendre les projets financièrement viables. This concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much to both. Before we turn to member questions of staff, we do have one presentation. Mary Huang, you've got 5 minutes to address the committee.
So bear with me. Okay, turn back off. Okay. Chair Leeper, Vice Chair Gower, and councilors. My name is Mary Huang, and I am coming here to speak as the president of Centertown Community Association and the co-chair of the CCA's Housing Affordability Working Group. I'm also being involved with Ottawa Community Benefits Network for the last 4 years, and I'm a member of the task force to revitalize Ottawa downtown, where we examine options to convert residential office to residential. The City of Ottawa has declared a housing homelessness emergency in 2020. And we have the 10-year housing homeless plan, as well as the integrated transition to housing strategy from this year. Everyone can see that the housing and homelessness issue, the housing crisis, homelessness issue has increased over the last few years, as all major cities in Canada. We have a lot of more people that's sleeping rough and so on. We lose 7 units of housing under 750 for each unit the government can afford to build. And that's according to a study by Steve Pomeroy, and that's using the dates of 2016 to 2020. So I'm here to be in support of the affordable housing project under discussion to be funded, and I would like to propose some ideas which we can potentially speed up things even faster. So a fantastic project, the OCH Melnick 18 Gladstone, as well as Salas, the Nepean Housing Corporation. The Salas is 54 units of supportive housing, and the acquisition that was approved yesterday of 1245 Kilburn Place, which along with the building and 8.7 acres can do a lot for supportive housing and mixed or affordable housing. But I would like to speak especially in favor of things like the MHI and Dream Cooperation for Dream LeBreton Flats, where there was 133 units of deeper affordable housing to be owned by MHI at 79% of median market rent MMR. Sorry, 59%. It's Dream that has the 79% for 117 units. And that is a level of affordability that's obtained by the $15 million the City of Ottawa is funding the MHI, plus the $15.7 million from co-investment and the concession prices on the land, plus higher density. So, but this is a very interesting new model, which that buildings asking for higher density actually do some affordable housing with a nonprofit housing provider. So in addition to the support, I would like to suggest 3 options. One is using the MHI Dream model. Maybe we can require some of the developer asking additional density, which there's a lot of it in center town, to offer or as a bylaw requirement to do some affordable housing, preferably with nonprofit housing provider. I will also recommend that we look at creating the City of Ottawa look at creating an acquisition fund similar to Toronto's multi-unit residential acquisition MIRA program to protect existing affordable housing, such as rooming houses and small apartment buildings in Ottawa by nonprofits, such as the 9.1 coming out with the Ottawa Community Land Trust. And looking into conversion options with incentives, such as the City of Calgary, to help revitalize the Ottawa downtown, and especially in view that the federal government will be downsizing very likely a third to half of their office spaces in the next few years. I actually helped to organize a virtual meeting for the task force with Steve Painter of Gensler Group, who developed expertise in conversions, and they, as well as a conversion calculator, they helped the City of Calgary with their the downtown development incentive program. And also, I have also talked with the federal government, multiple departments and ministries and MPs about the potential of a Section 95 type acquisition fund, federal acquisition fund, at a subsidized 2% interest rate and longer amortization at 50 years. And recently we have also requested that 30-year terms to be offered to nonprofits instead of 10-year consecutive terms as they do right now, because the predictability has a lot of value for nonprofits. So that concludes my delegation, and I'm open to answering any questions or discuss any of these ideas further. Thank you.
Mary, thank you very much.
Hi, Mary. Thank you
Hi.
so much. I share your passion for housing acquisition. I'm really thrilled that at this meeting, we actually just approved Jeff Leeper, Councillor Leeper, using his Section 37 money to help the Ottawa Community Land Trust acquire its first property. And I hope to do the same in my ward if I can figure out how to consolidate this. I can only buy in your word, yeah. I'm looking to consolidate Section 37 money in other categories and move it into affordable housing to help with an acquisition in my ward. So Paul, I'd be very excited to talk about that in the future. But I know that you referred to the Toronto's municipal acquisition program. And so now we do have the land trust that's starting to do some acquisitions. What do you think the city could do to help? How would you envision a city-based acquisition program?
I think it needs some funding to actually, the issue with nonprofits, they don't have a lot of capital. So what they don't have is the quick access to money. I volunteer for CCOC, and I don't think it's confidential. They actually bid on several properties, rooming houses, and they had the highest bid, but they have condition for financing, while the regular developer did not, and they lost it to the developer. So it's the additional time to actually get funding approved is something that's a little bit challenging in trying to acquire building. One of the things we're talking to the federal government and in Ministry of Infrastructure and also indirectly CMHC, and through my advocacy partner is a retired national director for CMHC. And one of the things that was discussed is that the for-profit developers can get financing kind of approved or limit approved by looking at their balance sheet and ability to pay. So whereas nonprofit going through co-investments, they are being judged on the project, which is a lot tighter, and then you require co-investment require all three levels of government. Right now, provincial funding is almost missing in action. So it's very difficult to get co-investment through, as well as I heard the grant money is down to very small amounts, around $25,000 per door. And more than money is in RCF5 and loan-based financing. That's why we've been, I know BC did a $500 million fund to be grant-based, but at cost of housing in BC, that's only 1,000 units, and the needs are much higher than that. So, we need to think a little bit outside the box and see, leverage anything we can.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. I very interested to see if the federal government comes through with some federal acquisition money. That's something we advocated for when I worked at FCM. And in the meantime, I'm excited about the first acquisition that Councillor Leeper is helping the Land Trust buy. So more on that later.
Actually, can I make an additional comment? Recently, the newly appointed Minister Sean Fraser actually said that there's a growing narrative of housing as infrastructure. And that's why we've been talking to them about like Vienna and Singapore has access to very low rate financing for their housing. And that's something which I think Canada should adopt. And it's a case where, our roads, our bridges, our LRT can get low financing. Why not our housing when it's 50, 100 years old? Lifespan, right?
Thank you so much, Mary. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I don't see any other questions for you from members of the committee. So thank you very much for your intervention. We now have an opportunity to pose questions of staff. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, both of you, for the whole team for your work on affordable housing. And of course, it's super important. And as chair of Ottawa Community Housing, enjoy hearing about these things. I have to see the presentations. It's like a wonderful storybook of what we're doing next, and appreciate it. But we know we need more. And one of the concerns I have is the growth. We have 12,000 people right now on waiting lists for affordable housing. And this will be, help, but we need so much more. And we're hearing about influxes of refugees coming in, and we need to accommodate them as well. Do we have a strategy that will work towards finding funding to accommodate these new people coming in who need housing as well?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chairs. Undoubtedly, there has been incredible strain put on our housing system, including our emergency response. And we are working at with all levels of government to mitigate the issues. People are at the table, people are identifying strategies, not just around housing, but along the continuum of care, such as employment and acquiring life skills to move people through the system as quickly as possible. And we are also locally, we are working with our immigration organizations, social services. Everybody is working together on how we can streamline the processes, build on best practices, because we have a lot of best practices. There are some really good successes happening. So how can we, in the short term, capitalize on those successes to make sure that people who come to Canada don't end up in an emergency shelter, right? There are better avenues, and we are exploring, working very closely with our community partners to again move people as quickly as possible out of the shelters into housing with supports.
Thank you. I appreciate it, because our shelter system is already overloaded, and I'm particularly concerned about families in places like motels, which is just heartbreaking, and it's totally inadequate. One of the game that we must play is that we must have things shovel ready, so that we can ask for money, so that we have things prepped up and feasible, so that governments can say that they can fund them. And how are we doing on that? Because that obviously we've done successes in the list that we have in front of us, but it's about the speed of reacting to when funding opportunities come.
Thank you for the question. And luckily, we've invested quite a bit in recent years for pre-development funding to agencies to become shovel ready. So I'll turn it to my colleague Lauren, who can provide a more accurate count of the number of projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we have set aside $4 million for pre-development funding in previous years, 2019 and 2020. We didn't set aside funds this year for pre-development funding, but there are, as you'll see in document 4 to the report, there are over 1,200 units that are in various stages of pre-development, getting prepared for being shovel ready or investment ready. So I think we're tracking well in that regard. Just need the funding.
I appreciate it. And of course, I appreciate Ottawa Community Housing's role in that, who are very interested in building large scale development and small scale development. But I also appreciate the other partners. And I want to say that that's important as well, that we have that variety, and appreciate those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, we saw with the exercise yesterday with the acquisition of 1245 Kilbourne that there's sometimes some aversion to supportive housing, whatever, in more suburban communities. Part of me feels that, there's obviously a stereotype, right? Obviously a stereotype, a view of whatever when you put up a building with supportive housing, because it's a very broad term. But I feel like, to put it bluntly, like sometimes to make it more palatable, something like inclusionary zoning is probably a good way to kind of push more of these units into the suburbs, because just because you can't afford a house doesn't mean you have to live downtown, or you have to live in this neighborhood, that neighborhood, right? You should have a lot of choice across the city to be able to afford where you want to live. So, and the thing that my colleague Councillor Kavanaugh there said about shovel ready, like I feel like there is a lot of potential in partnering with private developers in getting these projects off the ground quicker, at least on the physical building side. So, are there any things in the strategic plan to account for more inclusionary zoning, or at least introducing it on a small scale at some point?
Chair, we are working on a community improvement plan. It's not in this strategy, but we're working on a community improvement plan for affordable housing that would target the private sector and incentivize them, provide some financial offset, I suppose, to be able to deliver some affordable units. That will be before Finance and Corporate Services Committee on October 3rd. Inclusionary zoning is actually on hold at the moment. It's pending regulations to come out through Bill 23. But again, that would target private sector developers for affordable housing. Both of these, though, the incentive tools, CIP and IZ, they would target more of a middle income. It wouldn't really reach the deeper affordability. We turn to our not-for-profit partners to deliver that.
Yeah, understood on the middle income point. Okay, that's all I had. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Chair. So first of all, I want to say there are many projects in this capital plan that are in Somerset Ward. I'm very excited about the second part of Rochester Heights. And also, Councillor Lowe, just in response to your question about partnership with private developers, the Multi-Faith Housing Initiative project is really exciting at LeBreton, because it's the first time I think we're seeing in Ottawa where a nonprofit is getting air rights to specific floors of the building. And I just want to emphasize how important that is, because they are able to provide a really deep level of affordability, 59%, and not just median market rent in the whole city, but in the specific neighborhood. And Somerset Ward has the highest rate of poverty in the city. So it really will be deeply affordable. But on the contrary, we're seeing lots of examples where private developers have benefited from the rental construction financing initiative through the CMHC, and they've produced zero affordable housing. So every time a private developer comes to me and wants to build a tall building, I'm encouraging them to explore this model because I think it has a lot of potential. But I am, so these projects are excellent, but I'm concerned in this meeting alone, and Councillor Brockington did the math, we approved 1,249 new apartments today. This plan would build 1,224 affordable homes in 4 years. This is not acceptable. And I'm not saying that staff aren't doing everything that you can, but we're not giving you the money that you need to build affordable housing anywhere close to the scale that we need in this city. I would just like to point out that a 1% tax increase would be $20 million. Other cities have considered an affordable housing tax levy. That would be $20 million a year that could go to affordable housing. I'm just putting that idea out there because I know that my next question, so my question that I'm getting to is, so you mentioned, should there be any remaining or additional funding, that there are other priority projects that you'd like to fund? What is the funding gap we're looking at to be able to build the projects that you know that are in the pipeline and that you would like how much money do we need? I think on your slide, it was in the range of 200 million. Okay. So obviously, if any of our federal or provincial partners are listening, this is an invitation to come to the table, but I would suggest that if we're more ambitious, we're going to attract more investment. And so just to repeat, 1,249 new apartments approved just today in this meeting, and less than that are proposed for the next 4 years. That really does worry me. I also just I have some concerns about the data in this report. I pointed this out actually when the housing department gave an orientation to new councillors a few months ago. It is still listing the average market rent in Ottawa for a studio apartment in the neighborhood of $1,100. It's double that now in downtown Ottawa. It's $1,800 to $2,000 for a studio to one bedroom. So I'm just very concerned that we're working with numbers that are up to 50% inaccurate I just did a perusal of rental listings this morning while we were sitting in this meeting. I'm not seeing a single apartment that's less than $1,800 in the city of Ottawa right now. If I'm seeing anything less than that, it's to share an apartment. So I'm just wondering what we can do. I mean, I understand that those are provincial averages, but I'm concerned if the city is using those averages, we're not, we're in trouble because if we're assuming that people can access rents of $1,100 for a studio apartment, I don't know where you'd find that.
Thank you for the question, Councillor, through you, Chair. I'm not surprised to hear that they seem shocking. They are 2022 numbers that are CMHC. It's not the city that determines that, and we have to use those numbers. It's our ongoing issue between, you know, someone setting the rates and the actual cost of renting in this community, and then calculating the housing benefits. It's a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, well, and you know very well that people are not accepting the portable housing subsidy. They're staying in shelter because they know that that portable housing subsidy will not get them the housing they need on the private market. And this is part of why we have so many, we have 300% capacity in the family shelter system.
Yes.
Just
why we are piloting.
Yes, I am very excited about the pilot for a higher subsidy for bigger families. And I've been talking about that. I think that's a very good thing. I just have, my last question is, you know, given the backlog we have in the pipeline, I know I asked this when you brought the initial housing HAF application to us, but why did we not ask for more money if we have unfunded projects sitting in the pipeline?
Thank you for the question. So in terms of the Housing Accelerator Fund ask, the request that we put forward was reasonable based on what we could achieve. And there's a danger in over estimating and then you're not getting the funding back, or you're being cut back in terms of the realistic expectations.
Okay.
Unless you want to add.
So what would you need from us to be more ambitious is what I'm saying. I know the answer is money, but you know, I know that we're entering a budget period where council is going to tell you approximately what tax rate to set, but I would really like to know how much money you would need to actually meet our targets for affordable housing. I'll let you sit with that. Maybe I could do that as an inquiry, but I just, it's really hard to go into budget season not knowing what you would need to meet the need versus conform just to an arbitrary number that council says.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could ask, answer the first question from the councillor on the Housing Accelerator Fund. There are estimates based on what we get from CMHCs based on what we think the city can produce. And it's not a one-time payment. So we provide those units up front. And then those payments are done in quarterly installments. And so CMHC will monitor the production of those units. And if those units aren't produced, then the preceding funds aren't provided. So to Mr. Levine's point, we need to have some idea of realistic expectations in our projections in order to receive those funds.
Thanks, Chair. We are expecting a refresh on the housing and homelessness plan before the end of the year. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the refresh will begin in 2024, and it usually takes a year to complete.
Okay.
Which will include a comprehensive housing analysis, needs analysis, as well as a broad consultation process. So it's a fairly big undertaking. So we should have the results by early 2025.
Okay.
And this is also a provincial legislative requirement that the provinces launch. You know, we anticipate they'll launch soon for all municipalities across Ontario to undertake that process.
Okay. My next question, I don't think is relevant anymore, but saying I'm struggling a little bit with the targets we have set for ourselves, because I completely appreciate the need to be aspirational in the targets, given the need, given the wait list. But we're failing the current targets pretty significantly. So I'm concerned that they're not realistic. We were just talking about sort of realistic expectations for ourselves. So I don't know how you square that circle in terms of setting something that's aspirational, but at the same time achievable. So I guess it's more of a comment than a question, but.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the question. It's actually been a source of great discussion in the sector, housing and homelessness, when we were developing the 10-year plan, the first iteration as well as the refresh. And, it's always that debate, how aspirational do you go with your targets? And with respect to the affordable housing options, both the new builds as well as the subsidies, we felt at the time, given the trends, given the economic conditions, that our targets were very sound, and it was also linked to long-range financial plan. It did make some assumptions that the other levels of government would contribute as much. That hasn't happened as much as we had hoped. And then there was the pandemic, and then all the fallout from that. So all this to say that there are obviously some extenuating factors that are beyond our control. But reflecting back on when we established with these targets with the community, it wasn't just staff that did that. It was based on extensive consultation with the community. I still believe that those targets were appropriate.
Okay. Thank you. Finally, I note for the Rochester Heights project, average rent across the units is approximately 95% of average market rent, and typically the benchmark would be 80%. So just, is 95% still considered affordable? And is that sort of barometer going to be applied to other projects as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That target is not the best. It's certainly the deeper the affordability, the best it is. It's also tied to the amount of funding. So if more funding would be available, we would be able to purchase a deeper affordability. Unfortunately, we're trying to stretch the dollars as much as we can, and cater to a wide range of people who need our services and need affordable housing. It's really a balancing act, but we hope that our hope would be to be able to provide deeper affordability.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Kitts, I was wondering if I could just clarify that though, but it is a mixed market model in those buildings, so that's why the average might look higher. So this is the building across the street is the first time CCOC OCH experimented with this model, which is very similar to CCOC, which is that it's 50% market and 50% deeply affordable in the building. So then the averages will look higher, but even the average market rents are lower than you would find in the market, like much lower. So am I correct, Teresa? Yeah, that's correct.
Great. Appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor King, welcome to Plan.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd really like to thank staff for their great work on this capital strategy and update. I know that my ward is a beneficiary of some of the capital investments that have been undertaken, including by Ottawa Community Housing for 715 Mickinac Road, which we heard about 271 affordable units, and other investments, Habitat for Humanity, Shepherds of Good Hope in the past. It's important that we continue to make these investments and fill the gaps that I know Councillor Troster had asked staff to identify. That's very important. What I'm also concerned about, however, is the impact of inflation on some of these projects. So I just wanted to ask staff if they could speak to the impact of inflation, because we know a dollar that we approve today is not worth the same next year. And we know that these are multi-year projects in terms of implementation and construction. And we also know that, over the last several years, we've seen the impact of inflation and as well supply chain on our construction projects. So I'm just wondering how is staff accounting for the impact of inflation in this capital strategy?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, through you. Without a doubt, the high interest rates, the inflationary costs, construction have risen and have made it more difficult for us to meet our targets and objectives. Just to put it into perspective, about 3 years ago, the average subsidy was around 120,000, and now we're up to 200,000. So when we look at the amount of funding we're going to get and try to allocate the funding, that's a pretty big impact, right? So we are hopeful that things will stabilize, and that with the refresh of the long range financial plan that is coming in the fall, we'll have a better sense of the associated costs and what we can have in terms of outputs, which will then feed into our 10-year housing and homelessness plan refresh. To Councillor Kitt's point, is look at our targets again, and are they realistic based on what the current environment is, based on our future projections, and what we can realistically achieve over the next term of council.
I appreciate that answer. To translate, are we being proactive when we are dealing with senior levels of government in terms of the requirements? Because there have been projects where we have received dollars, but we have to come back for more. So I'm just wondering if we're being more proactive due to the impact of inflation when we are having negotiations and negotiating financial arrangements with the senior levels of government.
Thank you for the question. In actual fact, yes, the short answer is yes. We meet regularly with our colleagues at CMHC to review the projects, to review the barriers, the challenges that we're experiencing, and especially the increased cost and inflationary impact that it has on our projects. So every opportunity we take, we certainly do take advantage of it to try to mitigate these scenarios and make sure that we deliver on target.
I appreciate that. I know that yesterday we got some confirmation that the city treasurer and the finance department is working on a municipal price index. And if we are seeing a refresh of our 10-year housing and homelessness plan, it would be good to ensure that that MPI is integrated into that report, or at least that financial formula is integrated into that report. Thank you so much for the hard work on this report. Thank you so much for the investments the real investments that I feel that we are seeing in the city in terms of housing. And we will look forward to further updates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. I thought for sure Councillor Trosser was going to lower a motion on us. Laying some truth. Not yet. Not yet. Biding time. I don't see any other questions for staff. Lauren, Paul, thank you very much for the continued excellent work on this. And thank you to members of the committee as well. Meeting after meeting, this committee is seized with housing issues. It's noticeable. I've been a city councillor now for 9 years, and this committee is dealing far more with housing issues than previously, indicative, I think, of the commitment that this council has made to addressing housing issues in the city. So is this report carried? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I don't think Councillor Hill is here. He spoke to me very briefly about his motion with respect to the requirements to mitigate against increased wind uplift loads on roofs. I indicated to him in a quick conversation that I suspected this was not going to be controversial and might pass even if he were not able to intervene on it. I'm wondering if maybe a neighboring councillor might be willing to put this motion forward on David's behalf so that he can address it at council.
Sure. You want me to read it in then, I guess?
Thank you.
Yep. So whereas two EF1 tornadoes touched down in Barrhaven on the 13th of July, impacting over 125 homes, and the third EF0 tornado touched down in Finley Creek on the 3rd of August, impacting 12 homes. Whereas the August 3rd tornado represents a 7th extreme wind event in Ottawa since 2018, including the EF3 tornado that devastated Dunrobin in the 2020 derecho that damaged wide swaths of the city. And whereas extreme wind events do the greatest structural damage to roofs, causing thousands of dollars in damage and leaving residents without a primary home for months, and in some cases years. And whereas stronger fastenings where the frame of the house meets the roof, known as hurricane straps or tornado clips, are a cheap and effective solution to secure roofs during extreme wind events. And whereas the provincial government is currently considering amendments to the 2012 building code, therefore be resolved, the mayor, on behalf of council, write a letter to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, conveying the City of Ottawa's support for the province's proposed green building code to include requirements to mitigate against increased wind uplift loads on roofs, in order to better create more wind resilient communities. So a little bit of a tiny bit of context for this. Right now, most suburban houses with gable roofs are fastened using nails only. And we know that in most wind events, a lot of the wind kind of pushes these roofs up. In fact, one of the tornadoes in Barrhaven at some point over the summer blew a roof over the train tracks. Like one house actually lost its entire roof and it landed in somebody's backyard. So these straps were made mandatory in Florida after the 1992 Hurricane Andrew, I believe his name is. And since then, they've been required in Florida. Currently, no Canadian province or territory requires them. There are some localized requirements in Canada, but we feel that these are an inexpensive way to help people prevent the loss of, their roof. The roof over their head, literally. So while obviously this motion doesn't make anything mandatory, it does indicate our support for such a measure to be implemented into the updated building code coming later sometime.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lowe, for bringing that forward on Councillor Hill's behalf. And I know Councillor Hill will probably want to address this as well when it comes to council if it passes today. But there is a question from Councillor Brockington.
No, I just wanted to say that Councillor Hill and I have spoke about this motion when he was first thinking about it following recent incidents in Barrhaven, and as he's the vice chair of the Emergency Preparedness Committee as well. I'll just say that in River Ward, there are still homes that stand today that were hit by the May 2022 derecho that have still not been repaired, that still have tarp over their roofs. The siding is missing. That damage was so significant that they still are in that condition. So I don't know the green building code in and out, but what I do know is that incidents that we've experienced this decade are going to happen more frequently. And we need our housing to withstand or better withstand incidents like what we've experienced. So it's the reality that we live in. And I'd rather spend a little bit more today when a home is being constructed than have to repair it, the significant money that is required there. So I do support this. And again, like I said, I think it's an ounce of prevention is a valuable investment at this point, given the weather that we know is coming. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brockington. Just before we pass it, I know there's not a lot of debate on this one, but I just wanted to give staff the opportunities. Are there any cautions that you would have for us, or can we be fairly confident passing this?
Thank you, Chair. I know when the notice of motion was tabled, I reached out to our chief building official and he had no concerns with this approach.
Thank you very much. So with that, is this item carried? Thank you very much, colleagues. And again, thank you, Wilson. Are there any notices of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting? Inquiries? There is no other business. We are adjourned until our next meeting, Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. Thank you very much, colleagues.